This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Donald Trump needs a weak dollar.
Have we achieved the soft landing? Has the Fed kind of done its job?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news. Fears over a broader regional war in the Middle East. The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr on assignment with the 10-1 Detroit Lions.
I mean, there's a correlation there.
There's a correlation there. Defensive line coach. He's
Yep.
out there. It's like an internship.
Right.
You know, Lend-Lease.
Yes.
That's what it's.
Okay.
Lend-Lease program
Yep.
to the Detroit Lions. Lisa Mateo with us as well. Yes, we'll do the newspapers. I got 3 emails this morning. Are you going to do the newspapers with Lisa? That's all they want to know.
Exactly.
They don't care
I know.
about you. They don't
I know.
care about me. We start strong. Michael Cushman, Morgan Stanley with us here in moments on the positioning within these markets. Paul, what am I looking at? We have Damian Sassower coming on. I'm watching currency with a vengeance as the litmus paper of the global system.
That's a great point, Tom. The dollar index stronger yet again. Dollar a little bit weaker here today, but we've had such a move higher in the DXY index here. You know, kind of buy the dollar, short bonds has kind of been a Trump trade. Now does that broaden out?
Tensions.
Yeah.
EM tensions.
Yep.
Dollar stronger and pick your EM and they go weaker as well. A huge economic week. It's a holiday shortened, actually for Paul Sweeney, a holiday lengthened week. I don't want any sympathy here, folks. I mean, out on YouTube.
I'm working Friday.
Sympathy. Sweeney took off 14 Fridays in a row
in the summer.
during the summer.
Exactly.
I don't want any, poor Paul, in all
now
that.
it's time to pay up.
26, 27. I can't even read all the lines on the screen. It's got to be 40 lines. What are you looking at in the ECO Go?
Well, ECO Go, Tom, I'm looking for inflation data towards the end of this week here on Wednesday. We'll get the PCE stuff and, get a real sense for the Federal Reserve, what they need to do with their next couple of meetings.
Personal income, personal spending. To me, the consumption juggernaut continues.
It does,
That's
Tom.
what I observe.
It does. I think you're right, Tom. The consumer out there is pretty solid. We're seeing that in some of the retailers with their numbers.
Let's get right to it from the Interactive Broker Studios. Your Bloomberg Business Monday Flash. Lisa Mateo.
You've got it, and we've got futures on the rise, and this says traders embrace President-elect Donald Trump's pick of Scott Bessent for Treasury Secretary as kind of positive for the economy. Right now, we have Nasdaq futures up 0.1%, 31 points. Nasdaq futures up 0.5%, 112 points. Dow futures up 0.6%, 300 points. S&P futures up 0.5% or 29 points. We head to the 2-year yield, 4.35%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.36%, and that's down 3 basis points. To currencies, we have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.3%. We have Japanese yen, euro, British pound stronger. Bitcoin at 98,000, and that's after kind of flirting with 100,000 last week. Shares of Bitcoin buying software company MicroStrategy, they're up 5%. That was after some big swings last week. And Commerce Bank stock down 6% in Germany. Investors bet that UniCredit's $10.6 billion bid for Banco BPM shows that its interest in the German bank is starting to cool. Banco BPM, BNP right now, BPM is up more than 2% in Italy. And a stock on the move, that satellite company Rocket Lab up 13%. Said it successfully launched its 56 electron missile. And finally, Macy's reported preliminary financial results for the third quarter. Its shares are little changed right now. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. What do you do on a Monday? We're into the holidays, but everybody's head is spinning. I look at the levels, 44,693 Dow futures. My head is spinning. You dial 1-800-MICHAEL Cushman, Morgan Stanley. Yes, CIO Global Fixed Income, but way more than that. Is it the Nifty 50? Is it the 60s?
It certainly is a new era, it seems, in economic performance post-pandemic. That fiscal policy, monetary policy, growth dynamics, productivity, the Fed being careful right now, all suggests that economic growth is going to continue going forward with maybe a slight inflationary bias.
Is it Keynesian? When you were at Columbia in economics, raging debates about J.M. Keynes. Is it Keynesian?
It certainly seems that we're having the follow-through of very, very easy fiscal policy from 20 through 22, 23 even, and that is still flowing through the system, and that has kick-started other elements, animal spirits of the economy, which is ongoing.
So what is your Federal Reserve to do here? Because the economic data seems pretty darn strong. Did they sit on the sidelines? Did they skip, I guess, a cut in December? I don't know. What do you think?
I think there's a good high probability, greater than 50-50, they will cut in December.
They will cut.
But
okay.
at that point, they're going to be much more cautious going forward. You're going from 5.5 to 4.5, 100 basis points. Not unreasonable, not dissimilar to what they did in 1995. After they realized policy rates were high, inflation was not going to get out of control. Cut rates to a slightly maybe restrictive area and just sit tight.
So what do I do in the fixed income space? I mean, the 2-year Treasuries give me 4.35%. For a lot of folks, that's a living right there. Or do I take some credit risk here?
Credit risk in shorter maturities is okay. So if you sort of, our strategy has been to kind of stick inside 5 years, pretty much. Floating rate notes, floating loans, all look pretty attractive with the yields you get, with the underlying strength which continues to exist in the economy.
But how about all these investment banks that call you every day? I've got new issue after new issue after new issue in the investment grade. We've had some of the biggest new issuance here since Labor Day. Do you guys buy those deals, or what do you do?
We pick and choose particular opportunities, but we try to not get too far over our skis, so to speak, when it comes to taking longer interest rate risk, longer duration interest rate risk at these levels of spread levels. Now, the yield levels look okay. You know, the combination of spread plus yield on Treasuries is pretty high by historical standard. Talking 5.5% on a high BBB, single A rated corporate bond is not bad historically, so the package still looks okay, but we would shy to shorter maturity things at the moment.
What does issuance look like? I mean, we're into the year end. Guys like you are working a 10-hour work week. I mean, I get that. You know, they got Party A.
Yeah, they made it.
Party B. Ellen Zentner has a party. Michael Cushman has to go. You know, that kind of thing. What's issuance look like into year end?
It's been strong all year long, and the markets
It hasn't let up, is what I've heard.
It hasn't let up, and the market absorbs it.
So what do I do here? I mean, I'm looking at my INGO function, Bloomberg Index Browser.
What's it called?
INGO. It is awesome, and it shows me where all the fixed income. You guys are actually making money this year, you know, as opposed to 2022. That by far the best performance was U.S. corporate high yield and U.S. leveraged loan index. The market's rewarding you for taking risk here.
Absolutely. The triple C element of the credit market has outperformed everything. Why? Because the probabilities of recessions keep receding, and those highly leveraged companies have proven an ability to withstand higher interest rates and manage their leverage reasonably well with strong nominal GDP growth.
How do you, from your purview, how do you look over at the equity market, the summing of the correlations, the political moment we're in into 2025? Michael Cushman of Fixed Income Land, you're the only one who read Fabozzi, on the equity markets. How do you perceive them?
Well, the equity markets are providing a great backdrop for credit because equity markets are rewarding companies for the performance they've been able to generate, which is keep costs under control, don't get too speculative in your performance, stick to your knitting, keep productivity strong, don't get too don't do too much M&A, don't get too far away from your core businesses, and that has been rewarded along the way, and that helps credit markets.
Okay, we have one final question, Paul.
Yeah.
You know how you say to yourself, things can never, you know, like the way Mr. Trump did on Long Island, outstanding, biggest swing in the country. Here's never. Here's a partial score. Good morning, the memory of George Carlin. Michael Cushman, Columbia 17, Cornell 9, Harvard lost.
Yes, they did.
At Yale.
The game.
Columbia is an Ivy League football champion. Never, ever would I imagine that.
It's almost inconceivable because I mean their performance the last 60 years.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a shock, as a lot of things have been shocking in the last couple of years.
And it's just extraordinary.
Yeah, I know. So they had 3 co-champions or something like that?
Yeah, it was a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Harvard's, you know, good morning, Mr. Coach Aldrich, and all up at Harvard.
That's right. So, yeah, we had the Yale won the game. We also had Lehigh Lafayette. That's another big
That was a big
rivalry.
one. We could discuss it,
The longest, oldest
18
football
something,
rivalry in the South is William & Mary and University of Richmond. Richmond won this
Really?
weekend.
You're a font of wisdom
I
this
am.
morning.
I know. I'm telling you.
Should we do one more bond question?
I want one more bond question. Is I think this U.S. labor market is at full employment. Do you think the Fed thinks we're at full employment?
I think they do. I think right around 4%, somewhere between 3.9, 4.3, 4.4. They drew that kind of line in the sand at 4.4 in the last FOMC meeting, that they do not want to see it higher than that. It suggests too high, too low, too high unemployment.
Michael, thank you so much. Michael Cushman, Morgan Stanley, with us to get us off strong here this morning. Damian Sassar will join us here on Foreign Exchange and EM. We're looking for Ian Lyngen as well, and William Lee. Thrilled to tell you, we start the 9 o'clock hour with William Lee. Macy's out with the oddest of odd headlines. I know this will be a news item this morning. I assume John Tucker's been working on it. Macy's asterisk. An employee, quote, hid a lot of money, $132 million minimum of delivery expenses.
What's a delivery?
That's a lot of
Is that
FedEx.
like FedEx and UPS? I mean, that's a It's kind of like a trader sticking tickets into their desk and not reporting.
That's sort
their
of like
trades.
me with Red Oak, keeper of the
That's
MX
right.
as well. With your news in New York City, here's John Tucker.
All right, Summit Paul hedge fund chief Scott Bessent is the nominee to become the next Treasury Secretary. Let's get more on this report from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
Bessent runs the macro hedge fund Key Square Group, and he has deep familiarity with global financial systems and currency markets. Many of Bessent's views are well known, particularly his 3-3-3 policy, cutting the budget deficit to 3% of GDP by 2028, spurring GDP growth of 3% through deregulation, and producing an additional 3 million barrels of U.S. crude oil per day. He's also talked about a phased-in approach to tariffs and extending Trump's tax cuts. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
The Biden administration trying to clinch a ceasefire in the Middle East before leaving office. Israel's ambassador to the U.S. says his country is close to an agreement with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Michael Herzog tells Israel's Army radio it could happen within days. It's unclear whether Hezbollah would accept a deal. A DHL cargo plane, this was flying from Germany to Lithuania, has crashed close to Vilnius airport, killing a crew member and injuring 3 others. Now, no cause of the crash has been listed. European and U.S. intelligence officials, you'll recall, had previously warned that Russia may be plotting to plant incendiary devices on the aircraft. And the International Climate Summit, that has ended. Nearly 200 countries agreeing to triple the amount of money available to help developing countries confront rapidly warming temperatures. And, of course, Wicked and Gladiator 2, two of the year's most anticipated films, brought in a combined $170 million in U.S. and Canadian theaters this weekend. And then there are the theater chains trying to differentiate themselves in an attempt to attract more moviegoers. So they're delivering lots of tchotchkes and experiences you just can't get on your couch. We're talking about $40 Emerald City popcorn buckets for Wicked fans. In the past year, collectible buckets, immersive screenings with its motion-enabled chairs and themed events have exploded in popularity. So do anything to get those theater goers into the theaters, you see.
Right now, Rotten Surveillance.
$40
We
on
go
a
to
bucket.
Rotten Surveillance. Come on, we're going to wait for the newspapers. Lisa, how are the movies?
My daughter loved Wicked. I liked Gladiator
what did
too.
you think?
But I didn't see Wicked. I saw the Gladiator. We split it.
Yeah,
The
how was
family
the
split it.
Gladiator?
Yes. But more people went to go see Wicked. The theaters were more packed in Wicked than they were for Gladiator. That's what I
There,
noticed
did you
when I
buy
went
the
there.
$40
I did
Emerald
not,
for
and
your
I would
daughter?
never buy a $40 popcorn bucket.
From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by BNY. BNY's expertise and insights can help clients achieve their ambitions. Visit BNY.com. All right, we've got futures advancing. And this is on this holiday shortened trading week, and that's not short of economic data. Tomorrow, we get the minutes from the Federal Reserve's latest meeting, along with new home sales, consumer confidence. Then on Wednesday, we have the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, yes, the PCE index, as well as consumer income, durable goods, and also that weekly report on initial jobless claims. So we have Nasdaq futures up 0.5%, 110 points. Dow futures up 0.6%, 284 points. We have S&P futures up 0.4%, or 28 points. The two-year yield at 4.36%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.36%, and that's down 3 basis points. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.3%. We have the Japanese yen stronger at 154.47 against the dollar. Euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin at just over 98,000. Few companies making news. That's Apple CEO Tim Cook visiting China for at least the third time this year. He's attending a suppliers conference there. And sources say Sony developing a portable console that can play PS5 games, and that would rival Nintendo's Switch. And finally, the Financial Times reporting Goldman funds. They're set to write down almost $900 million on investments in troubled battery maker Northvolt. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
And Lisa, thanks so much for that. Really, really important. Paul, I don't know what the numbers are. I don't have them in front of me, but Goldman, X number of months ago, said this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. We're doing batteries in Sweden or whatever. Right. And now they take a near $1 billion write-off. Is this private equity to come?
I don't know. I thought, Tom, in 2022, when we had equity markets and fixed income markets both tanking, that we would have seen some huge write-downs from the private equity.
But they extended it.
And they never did. They never did. And, that just brings to my mind, I think, when you invest in these things, you better be careful about valuations and marks, because there's not much regulation.
I totally agree. And, folks, it will be a theme into 2025. Let's get to that right now. Jackie Bowie joins us, Chatham Financial. Jackie, I didn't mention this with Michael Cushman of Morgan Stanley. We were doing the eminence grise, what do you do with your portfolio thing. Percolating in the last 5 days has been a global disinflation tone. You have a single sentence, German bond yields expected to fall further. Is that the surprise of 2025, an arch disinflation globally?
Well, certainly in the Eurozone, that seems to be the main theme. Yeah, in this question about where German bond yields are trading relative to the rest of Europe is certainly going to be a big theme going into next year. Obviously, the Germans have called an election, so 23rd of February next year, and the whole question around the debt brake, it's all about the fiscal position across Europe, the US and the UK, but particularly acute in Europe.
At Chatham Financial, can you carry that across the Atlantic to America and model out, say, a 10-year real yield that gets to where a lot of our guests are saying, souther?
Yeah, well, I don't make market predictions like that, so I don't need to be quite on the spot. But I think the challenge is, and I think we talked about this when I was in before, do fiscal deficits matter? They certainly matter over this side of the pond. It feels they matter less in the US. But yeah, let's see once the new government comes in next year.
So, Jackie, talk to us about just the UK economy here. I mean, we understand that weaker economic outlook, maybe inflation's coming back. Give us just an overview of what's happening in the UK these days.
Yeah, so I think we talked before about this kind of the last mile in inflation is always the hardest. And it's the same, Powell has used similar language, the kind of bumpy ride of getting inflation down. So the UK managed to kind of hit their target of 2%. And then we had a CPI number just last week, which kind of put inflation back up at 2.3%. Now, it was expected to increase, but it was even higher than where forecasters had put it. And now we're expecting inflation to be back up at 3% by kind of first quarter 2025. So it puts the Bank of England in a real difficult spot. We've got another rate meeting in December. Now expectation that they will not cut by another 25 basis points. But the challenge that the UK has relative to the US is the economic growth position is very weak. It wasn't great going into the budget, and post-budget sentiment is even worse. And that's both in the PMIs as well as consumers. So if you look at retail sales, so that real challenging position for the Bank of England where you have an ugly growth position and inflation actually moving back up again.
How is the UK consumer, Jackie? I mean, give us a sense of just kind of the labor market, retail spending. How is the UK consumer doing?
Yeah, so the last retail sales number were pretty weak. And, economists will try and unpick that and find seasonal reasons as to why. Our schools here had a late half-term holiday in October, and they're saying, is this the reason retail sales were weak? I don't think that is the case. I think generally sentiment is pretty low post the budget. And we look at the employment situation, and this is where it gets difficult. The UK gathers employment data based on surveys. It's called the LFS, the Labour Force Survey. Responses to that survey are at an all-time low. So if you look at where our employment data is, I don't think you can believe it. So the ONS, who are the statistical office, are trying to redo that survey to try and get more accurate data. I would just say, though, we're very focused on where pay settlements will be at the end of the year, and because that obviously will have an impact on inflation.
But the heart of the matter, Jackie, is for people shocked at Walmart at a 35 multiple, is Europe is a value trap. Is it value with growthiness? Or is it value and a trap?
It certainly doesn't look like there's much growth to get excited about, particularly in that retail sector. And you can take that across the core European countries, so France and Germany, and also in the UK. And if you think that GDP growth might be 0.8% in the UK, Germany will be in recession, there is nothing. There are no positive growth stories to really look for in our markets. So.
Tottenham is a positive growth story. Did you see what they did to Manchester City?
I don't know. What happened?
4-0.
Oh.
It was like the Red Sox sweeping the Yankees or something like that. Jackie Bowie, thank you so much. Chatham, Europe, of course, managing partner there with a little bit of transatlantic. I mean, what do you do? There was a chart this weekend. I saw it like 4 different places. Barron's, thank you. Moonshot of money flowing into America.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
So do you buy Europe dirt cheap or not? It's a big question.
It's a big question. I mean, in Europe, we talked to Tim Craikett over at Bloomberg Intelligence, who does all this strategy stuff over there, and he says, okay, the UK market's cheap. I mean, like materially cheaper than the US. But that's for a reason. They don't have a lot of tech, really almost no tech in their marketplace. Therefore, they don't have that valuation. So you got to be careful in getting into some kind of value trap there. So you have to have some cyclical strength in the economy over there for the financials to work, for the energy to work, for the industrials to work. You can't just kind of throw money at it like you do almost sometimes in the U.S. market where tech and tech earnings are going to bail you out time after time.
The good news, Paul, is we had a tweet come in from Paris. Oh, here it is.
Whoa.
So you get to listen to my lousy French. Okay, merci. J'allume la radio Bloomberg sur Internet.
Okay, getting their radio.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
In your afternoon commute in Paris, in all of continental Europe.
Sure.
Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, it's growing every day. I got to get a year-end brief on Apple CarPlay because they keep putting out software.
Okay.
All that.
We'll get the Apple people in here.
Once at your office, YouTube. Once at your home, YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Shocked at the growth, international growth as well. I did Mount Washington. They listen on the top of Mount Washington.
Well, you can get a signal
in New Hampshire. Yep. 11 degrees. It's warm today.
Yeah, exactly.
Global warming.
It is.
11 degrees centigrade. Good morning, WBOS. 92.9 FM, Bloomberg in Boston. Thank you for the many, many comments on that. Paul, it's a market lift. Is it a Bessent market?
I think it might be. Look at the VIX here, Tom. I mean, just sitting here right just above 15. That tells
in
you
from
what you
17.
need to know. Yeah, in from 17. Anything below 20 feels pretty solid here. So I think it's the Bessent.
Sterling 125.52 for Jackie Bowie. Euro 104.75. Will we see weaker euro? 103. Good morning, 99.1 FM Washington, Bloomberg 11.30, our flagship in New York. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures pointing to a higher open. This is after incoming president named Scott Bessent for Treasury Secretary. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.4%, 102 points. Dow futures up 0.5%, 259 points. S&P futures up 0.4%, or 25 points. Right now we have the two-year yield, 4.35%, down 2 basis points. A yield on the 10-year, 4.36%, and that's down 3 basis points. We have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.3%. The Japanese yen stronger. We have the euro, British pound stronger, and Bitcoin just over 98,000. Few companies making news. Amazon building its own chip-making operation to turn data centers into AI machines, also reduce its reliance on NVIDIA. And quantum computing stocks, they're really gaining after Amazon Web Services announced a program to help customers get ready for quantum computing. You have Rigetti Computing up 42%, D-Wave Quantum up 13%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciated. Now joining us is one of our hugely most popular guests. Henrietta Trays knows every corner, every alley. She knows where to take a nap in the Capitol.
Gotcha.
It's a rare skill.
Yep.
She joins us now on YouTube and, of course, on your commute across America with Veda Partners. Okay, Henrietta, I just want to know in our 3-hour discussion, what are we going to observe at Senate confirmation hearings? When do they start? Are they going to be in smoke-filled rooms with Sam Ervin and Howard Baker? What are we going to observe?
Oh, man, is it bad that sounds so appealing to me? I would love to see that. That's going to start very early on after Inauguration Day. Historically,
Really?
You can get the top 3 confirmation hearings. I mean, they'll try to start before with the hearings before the president's inaugurated, but those folks usually get sworn in around the 26th, the top seats, whether that's Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Treasury Secretary. By the end of January, they should be confirmed and in their positions.
Are we going to be glued to the TV watching CNN 26 hours a day? Are we going to be glued to it, or is it just like Henrietta doesn't care?
I mean, people are already glued to it, and the administration haven't even started yet. We've already seen some nominees get proposed and then rejected without even going through the hearing process. So I definitely think that just like in the first term, Trump 2.0 is going to be must-see TV almost every day. Yeah.
So, Henrietta, Scott Bessent has called for a phased approach to tariffs. Does that line up with President-elect Trump and his maybe more aggressive stance?
Right. I actually heard from Scott Bessent last month on this very topic, and he was saying I support something like a 5 percentage point increase in tariff rates every month. I think that's, just a sort of a novel way to approach it, but it's not too dissimilar than what Ambassador Lighthizer proposed during the first round. We would have these leaps scheduled in list 1, 2, 3, 4A from, for example, 25% to 35%, some of which went into effect throughout the year with these deadlines. I mean, I remember that August time horizon so distinctly when the list 3 tariffs went up to 25% where they stand today. So that idea of looming increases is a novel approach to do it every month by 5 percentage points. But I think it's consistent with continuing to ratchet up and insist that you get your way out of the EU or China.
Okay. The applicable subheading for the Vespa and Lambretta scooters will be $8,711.20. If the cylinder capacity exceeds 50 cc and Paul Sweeney balances a beverage of his choice on the handlebar, it will be $8,720.03. I mean, come on, Vespas? They're going to raise the tariff on Vespas?
I mean, it's not just Vespas. That's a fun one to look at. But if you put on the List 4B tariffs, which we recently heard from Biden administration folks say, if it was easy, we would have done it. This is everything that you buy at the grocery store. This is milk products, alcohol products, frozen shrimp. I mean, it's literally everything. So when we get into the next phase of the trade war, and I expect it to be the U.S. declaring that China is in violation of phase 1, which y'all know is about agriculture purchases, which China has not met in the 4 years since the agreement was reached. You label them in violation of phase 1, and really there's no limit on what you can do with the Section 301 tariffs. And that's not even including expanding export control restrictions. Some of the former USTR folks are talking about increasing or proposing a brand new sanctions basket on China because of its lack of preparedness or lack of response to the phase 1 trade deal and the ongoing issues we have with them.
Henrietta, so Scott Bessent seems to be well received by the markets. Just looking at kind of the futures market today, the bond market. But there are still some other cabinet nominees that are probably a little bit more questionable, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard at DNI, whether it's Robert Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard. What's going to happen there? How is that nomination and confirmation process going to play out, do you think?
I think the nomination of some of those other candidates, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Hegseth at the defense agencies, I mean, those are going to run into some very real problems. And I think what the senators are trying to do now is tell the White House, hey, this fight is not a fight worth having. We just saw that with Matt Gaetz. With some of these names like Scott Bessent, I think the market is relieved because it could have been the most competent tariff person in D.C., which is Bob Lighthizer, in that role. So I think there's sort of a relief that it's not him. But my biggest question is, where does Bob Lighthizer go? I mean, not having him in the administration would be like benching Michael Jordan. You want that guy in your corner.
Okay, so where's he going? Paul took it from me, but great. Where's he going? I'm reading his book right now. He believes in a non-percent magnitude in tariffs. Where's he end up?
I think what could be interesting, and I don't know for sure, but I think a trade czar-like figure makes a lot of sense. This would be ex-cabinet official kind of position. You do not need to go through a Senate confirmation process necessarily, which is ironic because I think Bob Lighthizer could get through very easily in the Senate, as he did last time around. Most notably because he renegotiated the USMCA, which members are very proud of from the Trump first term. He worked very closely with Congress people on the Democratic side of the aisle to get that through with Ambassador Tai, the current USTR. So I think there's going to be a role for him. And the reason I say that with any kind of conviction is because we've seen the president propose that with things like the Department of Government Efficiency. That's not a federal agency, and yet it gets all this press. It's not going to have even any federal.
Okay, so what's going to happen there? I mean, Paul walked in today and he goes, I want to talk about Doge. And I thought he meant Bitcoin at 100,000. He was talking Musk and the other guy. Henrietta, what's actually going to happen with the Doge in Washington?
I mean, I don't want to just outright hate on the idea, but it's really hard not to. I would just look at history. The Simpson-Bowles Commission went nowhere. The Bipartisan Deficit Commission went nowhere. The $1.2 trillion sequester went nowhere. I mean, the idea that this unelected body is going to come in and tell House and Senate members what to do is laughable. They don't like that. And these are not federally elected officials, and they're going to be coming up with ideas that will require 60 votes in the United States Senate to apply. And the numbers are just not there. $2 trillion in reductions in federal spending during Trump's term is unrealistic in the extreme. So I don't put a lot of faith in it.
Henrietta, so that kind of calls into question Elon Musk. Is there any feeling in D.C. as to, on a realistic, practical basis, what kind of role he should play, could play, will play?
The biggest thing that's happening with Doge is that they're putting into the ether this idea that $2 trillion worth of savings is feasible. And what that does is it starts to seep into the minds of members and gets you this distorted figure of what deficit increases might actually be from the tax bill. Think about why all these ideas are out there. As a budget staffer, this is all I think of is, when you say that there's $2 trillion in savings, do members internalize that? Do they sort of digest that and put it into their calculus and then increase their own deficit appetite from the current $2 trillion threshold that is today to $4 trillion? Do they factor in $1 trillion in revenue from tariffs, and that then makes the deficit appetite $5 trillion? That's really what's happening here when they talk about Doge, when they talk about tariffs. You're moving the deficit appetite of lawmakers.
Henriette, I got to go nerdo. I got to squeeze this in. Bill Pascrell in New Jersey, dying this year, World War II hero, was very kind to me in the show. They had his vote. Biden won Paterson, New Jersey by 19 points last time around. This time around, Trump won it by 1 point. That's a 20-point swing. And of course, Nellie Poo is the new congressman, a Democratic congressman replacing Pascrell. Is that the future for the Republican Party?
I don't think it's the future. I think it is a benefit that that Republicans really turned out this cycle and Democrats didn't. The final tallies are still coming in, but Biden got 81 million votes in 2020. Kamala Harris is at 74 million. So a lot of this was lack of turnout on the Democratic side. I think there was a lot of consternation with the way that the process played out with Kamala Harris not having to go through the primary season. That's what I hear a lot of. And I think that going into the midterms, with a 2-seat majority in the House, it's very unlikely that those members stay. And for Pascrell's seat and for New Jersey, what's really at play here is the SALT deduction. The SALT cap, if it's maintained at 10K, those members in New York, New Jersey, California, Connecticut are going to have a real hard time getting reelected in 2026 in what will already be an uphill battle because there's one-party control.
Oh, John Tucker, you're nodding your head.
No, I was eating something. I'm not allowed to weigh in on these things.
Okay, either am I. Lisa can, though. Yep. Henrietta Trace, thank you so much for going where we cannot speak. She is with Veda Partners on the SALT cap, which a number of our members in control room and not are aware of and need an immediate. You're thinking, 3 days after inauguration?
Exactly.
Fix this puppy. With our news in New York City, he pays his fair share of taxes. John Tucker.
All right, Tom, Paul, and Lisa, investors believe the choice of Scott Bessent to be the Treasury Secretary is going to inject more stability into the economy and the financial markets. Let's get more from Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw.
As a hedge fund manager, he's sort of deep in that sort of Wall Street world and has a pretty good reputation among his colleagues for someone who understands how markets work. And so I do think that there is a pretty big sigh of relief from investors to say at least there's going to be, someone in the room who can speak for the markets. And the pick also suggests that Trump is eager to find ways to make sure that the markets approve of what he's doing.
Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw adds that Bessent has called for a gradual approach to implementing trade restrictions and has appeared open to negotiating on the exact size of tariffs as well. The International Climate Summit, that has ended, and after a bitter fight, there's a deal on climate finance. More in this report from Bloomberg's Gina Cervetti.
Nearly 200 countries agreed to triple the amount of money available to help developing countries confront rapidly warming temperatures. But the deal reached at the close of the 2-week COP29 summit in Azerbaijan resulted from fractious and at times openly hostile negotiations, producing an agreement that even its supporters may see as insufficient and disappointing. Rich countries have pledged to provide at least $300 billion annually by 2035 through a wide variety of sources, including public finance as well as bilateral and multilateral deals. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
The Israeli ambassador to the U.S. says Israel is potentially days away from a ceasefire agreement with Lebanon's Hezbollah. This follows a new round of shuttle diplomacy by a senior envoy for the outgoing Biden administration. And this is kind of like the obit page. Barbara Taylor Bradford, the million-selling novelist known for A Woman of Substance, has died. She was 91 years old. And then a game show giant has died.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Charlie. Oh, welcome to Wheel of Fortune.
Chuck Woolery was 83. His decades-long career included hosting Love Connection, Scrabble, and even taking a spin at Wheel of Fortune. That was years before Pat and Vanna. Later in life, he did host a right-wing podcast. Global news, 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Right. Game shows are a part of popular culture that people watch on television for enjoyment.
I missed most of it. I had a cousin who won big on the new Price is Right.
Yeah.
Like she won the whole kit and caboodle.
Nice.
You know, she had to pay a lot of taxes. That's what I remember.
Yeah.
She was like, they showed up in the driveway with all the stuff, and the state of California greeted her with a tax bill, or whatever. I don't, you know.
Okay.
I have a sheltered life. What can I say? I don't think I've seen a whole episode. I've seen The Feud, but I don't think I've ever seen a whole episode.
I don't know. He doesn't strike me as a Family Feud watcher. The typical watcher.
Let's see. Futures up 30. Where's Michael Barr get back? Futures up 30 from New York City. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Stay with us.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures advancing. This is investors seem to approve of President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Treasury Secretary, as Scott Bessent seen tough on government spending, also more balanced on tariffs. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.5%, 108 points. Dow futures up 0.6%, 295 points. S&P futures up 0.4%, or 28 points. We have the two-year yield at 4.35%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.35%, and that's down 4 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.4%. We have the Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin at around just over 97,000. Shares of Bath and Body Works, they're up 12% after solid third quarter results. Then you have shares of Target up 1.5%. That's after it was added back to Oppenheimer's top pick list after being removed last month. And speaking of retail, several retailers scheduled to report this week: Best Buy, Abercrombie & Fitch, Kohl's, Nordstrom's, Dick's Sporting Goods. Macy's, keep in mind, delaying third quarter earnings after an investigation revealed that an employee hid millions of dollars of expenses. We'll also hear from Zoom Video Communications after the bell, and as well as Dell, HP, CrowdStrike this week. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. There's such a demand, Paul. Don't you think we just got to get right to it?
Sure.
I think
absolutely.
We got to get right to it.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front pages of the Lisa Mateo Hour, acclaimed worldwide. It's brought to you by IBKR. With the Interactive Brokers Forecast Trader, you can trade your views on key economic and climate indicators. Visit ibkr.com/forecast. Get started today. ibkr.com/forecast. We thank Interactive Brokers for caring about us, their support of the show. Lisa, what do you have?
Okay, it was a little bit of a slow day today. I was struggling, but I did find some good ones. This is in the Wall Street Journal. It's a growing trend among couples. They're buying the house now and they're getting married later. So that is the recent trend. 2023, 555,000 unmarried couples said they bought their home in the previous year, and that's up 46% from 10 years earlier. So more people doing it. But yes, there's the risk. What if you break up? What if something happens to the other partner? So family law attorneys, they are busy. They're getting all these questions about it. Prenup cohabitation agreements can cost like $3,000. So they're saying people really have to consider
is the new thing you sell the house before you get divorced?
See, those are questions you have to ask.
I think the big issue is I don't know how young people afford a home. I mean, home affordability is out of control. The prices are high now. Interest rates, mortgage rates are high. I haven't seen a correction in the housing market. I'm not sure where.
And that's why they're going for the home instead of paying for the wedding. So now
exactly.
like, what goes first, the wedding or the home?
Yeah, you got to.
And then there's the destination wedding. There's a great cartoon this weekend.
Oh, yes.
About the destination wedding. Oh. I've had a couple recently where I'm going, you got to be kidding me.
It's tough because you as the guest have to fork up all this money to
it's
go.
for people without kids is sort of, one guy wanted to have it in tuition. It's a city in Southeast Asia or something. Next.
Yes, we talked about it. Wicked Gladiator 2, right? The box office. How much it did? $170 million between both of them, okay? Not close to the $245 that, the Barbenheimer brought in. But it still brought in a significant amount. But what the New York Times was interesting is that they talked about the money behind it, like the big marketing cost. How much Wicked's Universal, one of the largest marketing campaigns in Hollywood history. I mean, they started back in February at the Super Bowl, and you're going to see more Wicked at the Thanksgiving Day parade at Macy's on Thursday.
Right?
So for brand partnerships. I mean, you saw the Wicked dolls, the drinks at Starbucks, the Wicked Lego sets, the Wicked cardigans at Target. I mean, it's unbelievable. Even Gladiator 2, they put a lot of partnerships.
Did you miss Russell Crowe? Cut to the chase.
Oh, I did. The new guy was good, though. The new guy, Mescal, I think is his last name, but he was really good. Yes, he was really good. And Denzel was phenomenal.
Wicked Part 2 is scheduled for release next year.
Can you believe it? My daughter was so excited.
This is like, I can't remember, Game of Thrones or whatever. They make two of the movies at the same time.
Is that what they did here?
I think that's what they do, so they can
probably
come out with a
some
second
money,
one.
Yeah.
But
the budgets are huge.
I mean, Gladiator 2 cost at least $350 million to make and market. Yes. So that's a big number.
How do you account for $100 million of Ariana Grande,
exactly
prancing around?
Don't know. I mean,
is it like an expense deduction?
I don't know. One of the questions I have is, how are these things going to play in China, if at all? Because that had become a market right in line with the size of the U.S. market, and Hollywood made a lot of money over the last 20 years in China. I'm not sure if that's still the case.
Next.
But it is. It's a big thing. Okay, so you mentioned China.
Yes.
So we'll switch there. China, no longer the main source of U.S. imports, but tariffs really haven't slowed America's demand for foreign goods. I mean, this was really in the Wall Street Journal, too. Mexico took the top spot last year, and it's a shift started in 2018. Like, we saw it starting to change there with then President Trump, and now with his promise to impose another round of tariffs. What type of goods are we talking about? Smartphones, one of the big things. South Korea, India, Korea, Vietnam, 42% increase from 6 years earlier. Then the value of laptops, tablets imported from Vietnam, Taiwan, that's also on the rise too.
John Micklethwaite, with his interview with President-elect Trump in Chicago before the election, and Trump talked about the magnitude of tariffs to force jobs to America. But Paul, that's not what we're hearing from Secretary Bessent, according to Henrietta Trace. He wants teensy-weensy tariff increases.
Yeah, it's interesting. I
That's
mean,
the debate.
And the numbers don't lie. Last year, products coming from China made up 14% of all imported goods. That's the lowest share in nearly 2 decades. But many of the goods arriving from factories in Mexico and Vietnam, they still include components that originate in China.
Exactly.
So I don't know how this all works.
Vietnam is like 25% of what they output comes to America now.
Yep.
It's complex would be my answer, folks.
Yep.
Do you have anything else?
I do.
The New York Giants or Barclay of the Eagles?
No, please. That was very sad. Okay, Chinese fast fashion retailer in the spotlight. So parents are, if you're getting stuff for your kids, sometimes they turn to these cheap retailers like Temu, like AliExpress, like Shein. But the government of South Korea putting out this warning, hey, these clothes can have toxic substances. So this is what they're putting out the warning for. They tested 26 pieces of children's winter wear.
Yeah.
And 7 of them contain these toxic substances. But they're saying one of them, I mean, there was this jacket from Temu, 622 times a legal limit of toxic substances.
Can I do this with Fendi?
Can you do it? It's not going to work. Not going to work.
You mentioned Milan last week as well. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much for the newspapers today. Okay, I don't care about Wicked. I don't care about Gladiator. Wednesday, Moana 2.
Yes.
Moana 2. I'm watching Jimmy Kimmel, and they're over in Hawaii, and all of a sudden, The Rock shows up. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I had no idea how Moana Dwayne Johnson was. I mean, he shows up at the premiere here, his whole fam, the kids. He brings his mother on, who's Samoan. Okay. I mean, he's like real Moana, Lisa.
He is. He's from Hawaii. Like he always promotes it, always gives money like to charities in Hawaii. Like he's just very behind it. And his 2 kids, his 2 daughters are in the movie. They have voices.
They're in the movie.
Their voices. It's an animated.
He probably called up and said, "I'm not doing it
unless my kids are."
So are you going to go see Moana and get the $40 popcorn?
No, I think I might. I love it, but I can't sit through an animated film in the theater. I can't do it. I have to wait for streaming. I do.
Paul, do you go to theaters?
I do, but I haven't been in a while. But maybe.
Yeah, like what? Nixon?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Who knows? But I mean, that's kind of, if you're these big Hollywood moguls, you're trying to figure out how can I get people back into the theaters as opposed to just sitting on the couches waiting for the streaming.
It's that nostalgia. Like people love the first Moana, so this. They love the first Gladiator, so now this.
Yep.
Anything to do with The Rock? Her voice change.
Oh, I know. Yep.
Did you see that?
It's a little passion.
Moana 1, Moana 2 out this Wednesday in honor of Lisa Mateo. The power, the impact of our newspaper segment. Thank you, IBKR. Dwayne Johnson, our music today. Moana 1.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
What do you say to people scared stiff in cash?
We've got an administration, presumably, that will be pro-business, lower taxes.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news. Israel ratchets up offensives in Lebanon and Gaza. The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr on assignment with the Detroit Lions. Lisa Mateo here as well. We survived the newspaper segment.
We did.
We had a rock moment here. Thank you for the Moana play, Ken. Ken is our global technical director. Just nailed that.
Yep, exactly.
He's awake, too, this hour, which is even
I didn't know The Rock
better.
could sing.
He can. It's like real.
Guy
Like
can
he
do
can like
everything.
real sing.
He
like,
can do
like
everything.
He can do everything.
Oh, there we go. We continue our theme this morning on economics, finance, investment, international relations, and Dwayne Johnson. Futures up 30. Paul, why is the market up?
Why is the market up? I think they feel like this pick of Mr. Bessent is probably a calming pick, a pro-market pick.
Away
I don't
from
the
hysteria, whatever
Exactly.
your politics.
Exactly. So
Oh,
it
there
feels
we
good. We
are.
got the S&P up at 0.5%.
Lift to the market. Coming up, our interview of the day. I'm not kidding. It's not just that he's not worked from golf course today, but Damian Sassauer with us here in a moment. And seriously, folks, equities, bonds, currencies, commodities, the litmus paper of the system is foreign exchange. I'm going to grill Damian on the EM collapse here with DXY at 107. We say good morning on your commute. We say good morning on YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube podcast, Thunderstruck by the Growth. Good morning in Europe. We feature Paris today in the continental afternoon. Good evening across Asia. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got futures advancing. Traders kind of embracing President-elect Donald Trump's pick of Scott Bessent for Treasury Secretary. Positive for the economy. Dow futures, they're leading the gains up about 0.7%, 316 points. NASDAQ futures up 0.5%, 108 points. We have S&P futures up 0.4% or 29 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.33%. That's down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.34%, and that's down 6 basis points. To currency, the Bloomberg dollar spot index down 0.5%. We have the Japanese yen up 0.4%. The euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin trading at around just over 97,000, and that's after almost touching 100,000 last week. Shares of Macy's really under pressure, down 3%. It said it's delaying its third quarter earnings to next month. It's investigating a single employee accused of hiding up to $154 million in delivery expenses. And Commerce Bank stock down 5% in Germany. Investors bet that UniCredit's $10.6 billion bid for Banco PBM shows that the interest in the German bank, well, it's starting to cool. Banco is down, up more than 4% in Italy. And stocks on the move, satellite company Rocket Lab up about 10%. Said it successfully launched its 56th Electron missile. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. I have a chart, folks. It wasn't chart of the year because it's a little complicated, but it goes back to the Plaza Accord at the Plaza Hotel in New York years ago over a massively stronger dollar, and we're nowhere near the magnitude of the Plaza move. With that set up with DXY at 107, euro looking at parity, a weaker euro, yen 154, and EM flat on its back. Damian Sassauer, chief crisis correspondent at Bloomberg Intelligence. How bad is it for EM this morning? Is it unraveling?
No. Actually, EM currencies are coming back a little bit here. But to your point, I mean, the broad dollar has had such a big move. On 1 month, on a 1 month basis, there's not one currency in 30 with the exception of the Israeli shekel that's up versus the dollar this year. And I'm talking all the G10, including the yen and the Swiss franc. So, what do you do as a practitioner in this market right now? You try to kind of price in what the tariff and immigration picture looks like, and you see that you're going to pull a page out of the 2018-19 playbook where you're going to basically have front loading by China of all sorts of things, and you're seeing exports into China from Taiwan, Japan, South Korea all starting to accelerate. And you might actually see GDP in the first quarter of next year actually rise above expectations,
above
but
5%.
then it will. But then it should fall out of bed come Q2 and into the end of next year.
We know that President-elect Trump loves to hold a presser in the Oval Office and say we must get the dollar weaker. Can a president make the dollar? Can he move Damian Sassauer's market?
I tend to think that any political jockeying to move a currency tends to have the opposite effect, right? The market has a real knack for pulling on that string. And so, even though you might say that, Trump needs to weaken the dollar in order to pay for all this stuff he's planning, the dollar has a way of pushing back on that. And so I think we're seeing a bit of that here. I mean, look, the U.S. exceptionalism story is alive and well. You're seeing that across all the data. And look, let's not be clear. I mean, no one's talking about auctions this week. No one's talking about the 2- and 5-year auctions we're going to see in a shortened week week, and how that kind of slips into 12 the second of next year, December, because that's when those trades are going to have to settle. And we have payrolls at the end of next week, and then we have CPI the week after that. And by the way, this is going to go all the way through to the 19th of December when you have the BOJ, because the BOJ is in play. So you have so much coming in through the next few months. But I think if you just look at the sentiment data just on Friday out of Europe, and again this morning out of Germany, I mean, Europe is weaker. And you look at Euro US, to your point, it is a currency that is your primary mechanism, your primary transmission mechanism for all that's going on in the world. And the euro is at 104, and it's weaker, and it can easily go down to 102 and even, make a run at parity.
Do you understand a word he's saying?
All I know is, I think are your conversations with your clients, your EM clients, is it just where do we hide?
It's a great question, and I think it's where the central banks focus. And everyone wants to believe that they're focused on inflation and full employment, but that's not the case. It is the currency. How much room, how much scope do they have to stimulate their economy in the face of, what we're seeing globally? And you look at countries like Mexico, and you figure, you know what? Yeah, real rates are very high. Yeah, they could probably stimulate more. But then you look at Asia, where rates are really, really low in places like South Korea. They're going to have to move. I mean, they're probably going to hold, at 3.25% on Thursday, but they're going to try and signal the willingness to want to cut rates in January, but they may not be able to. I mean, Indonesia just held, you mentioned Philippines during the break, Tom. I mean, a lot of these countries that need to stimulate. I mean, I would have thought that, the Philippines were one of the central banks that were going to stimulate and cut rates the most of anyone in Asia. They may have their hands tied here into this first half of the next year.
INGO function. I click on EM, and I see green for year-to-date performance. Emerging markets are showing positive total return. Am I reading that right?
You must be looking at EM equities, which are up.
Okay.
And you must be also looking at EM dollar credit, again, which is up 6-7% this year. But EM local debt, anything in local currency terms for the most part, is really getting hit a little bit here just on the back of the stronger dollar. So it's a matter of bifurcation.
Where's the function to see how bad your world is?
Well, I like to look at EML1 TRUU, which is the EM local currency liquid government bond index. That's our Bloomberg special. That is a 10% country cap. We're not going to get into all that. Look, guys, let's talk about what the impact of tariffs is going to have. It might actually have a good impact on Mexico because, to your point, if Bessent's going to be slow in rolling this stuff out, with the exception of China, who's going to benefit, right? You don't want to have an inflationary spillover into the U.S. here. So Mexico might actually benefit from a 60% tariff on China. I mean, justifiably so, because he's going to take a little bit longer putting them into place against Europe and Latin America.
What if President-elect Trump capitulates and gives us a % marginal approach to tariffs? What does that do to DXY? How does it change Jerome Powell's dialogue?
Well, I mean, it should, in theory. I mean, it depends. You're talking about marginal towards China as well, right?
Everything.
Yeah, everything. So he takes a more of a...
The Secretary of Defense, whoever it is, sits down and says, you're out of your mind, go marginal.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, you would think that would actually be good for the dollar, be good for their fiscal situation, but it's actually going to be bad for the dollar. Because,
why?
Because I think it's going to impact growth and growth differentials. Now we have to look, Tom, at growth differentials on a inflation-adjusted basis with the rest of the world, and that's where the rubber meets the road, specifically with regard to currency performance.
Right.
And what you're going to find is that that's going to be a weaker net effect on the dollar.
With the time we got left, we have like 8 things to go to, including is rotisserie league.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
I think that's why Truman was a little bit grumpy just now, because he's coming off of 3 weeks in a row of losses.
Since John Madden, no one's done as bad as Truman, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's true.
Well, who's got Saquon Barkley is all I want.
I mean, my big money league, that would be me. But let's be clear. Richard Truman has Christian McCaffrey, and I think he has Christian. No, he doesn't. Who does he have? I don't know. He doesn't have anybody who's really important.
Give me EM currency, the euro. What's the impact if we go 103.21 through parity?
I think that basically emerging market currencies they basically have a higher beta to the euro than they did to the yuan in years past, right? So what I mean by that is euro US, that cross rate is going to have a far bigger impact on the performance of EM currencies than dollar yuan has had in recent history. So, what that means is effectively, if you see these growth differentials between Europe and the US widening, I'm talking like growth in Europe. If you look at the PMI data on Friday, it's implying basically no growth, flat growth, zero. I mean, they were at 0.7%. I'm looking at the data here. They're flat to negative here, looking at Germany and France on the services data. It's going to be bad. So that is basically bad for Euro US, and that's bad for EM currency.
David emails in on YouTube. Thanks for watching on YouTube, David. He says, Damien's Patagonia. It's like a really, really strange green. And he wants to know, do you wear your Patagonia with a sport coat?
I do actually. I wear it with underneath the jacket because I get very chilly in the mornings when I'm commuting in. Yeah, it is. But it's not
a look. It's a look.
It's a look.
Some guys can carry it off, Tom.
Some guys can't. Why are you looking at me?
I have green eyes. It's about to bring out the my long eyelashes.
In the warmer November here, do you get into some Thanksgiving golf here this week?
No, I've officially shifted my regimen. Now it's off-season training, so it's stretching, it's weights. It's glamour muscles for me, Tom. We got to get the buys and the tries working so that next season when we put on our polos, the ladies are looking. They're looking.
So family.
Sorry, Tom.
Damien, this is
John Tucker.
I'm having a good morning.
This is a family broadcast.
Please help me, save me.
There
at the golf club.
with 107 DXY, Euro 104.97. Let's get right to it with our news in New York City's cut and chiseled John Tucker.
Anyway, we're seeing a market cheer for President-elect Trump's pick to lead the Treasury Department. Key Square Group founder Scott Bessent. Bloomberg's Laura Davison has more of this report from Washington.
Scott Bessent is very much a known entity on Wall Street. He invested for Soros for many years, and in recent years, he's run his own macro hedge fund. So he's seen as someone who understands markets, who's competent.
Well, Matt Gaetz may be out as Attorney General, but some of President-elect Trump's other cabinet picks could be in for a tough road on Capitol Hill. Senators also have questions about Tulsi Gabbard's meeting with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad when she served in Congress. And Pete Hegseth is under scrutiny over a 2017 sexual assault investigation and his stated view that women should not serve in combat. Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Michael Herzog, says a ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon could come within days. That's what he's telling Israel's Army radio after the latest round of U.S. shuttle diplomacy. Bloomberg Middle East anchor Jemana Bersenchi is monitoring from Dubai.
Amos Hochstein, the Middle East envoy, was just in the region last week having conversations with the Lebanese side and the Israeli side. He spoke to the Lebanese Speaker of the House, Nabi Berri, who suggested that a ceasefire agreement has been accepted by Hezbollah, but with a few, quote, technical details. Now, it remains to be seen what exactly those technical details are, but definitely Amos Hochstein felt like he had enough in offering to go to the Israeli side. And we're hearing this morning from that ambassador that they potentially could come to a truce agreement in the next couple of days.
Bloomberg's Jemana Bersenchi in Dubai there. Nearly 200 countries agreed to triple the amount of money available to help developing countries confront rapidly warming temperatures. With the deal reached at the close of the two-week COP29 summit in Azerbaijan, resulted from fractious and at times openly hostile negotiations. Airports and highways expected to be jam-packed during Thanksgiving week, a holiday period likely to end in another record day for air travel in the U.S. The people responsible for keeping the security lines, boarding areas, and jetliners moving swear they are prepared for the crowds. But then you have a strike by service workers in Charlotte Douglas International Airport. That's threatening a hub in the Carolinas for now. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker. This is Bloomberg. Tom and Paul.
Paul, quickly, what does Moana 2 mean to Disney?
I think it's a good franchise for them.
Huge, like $700 million.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is one of the ones that they hope they can kind of, do what they do to Disney across all their platforms. Tom.
Interesting. Lisa Mateo report on Moana. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures advancing on this holiday-shortened trading week, and it's not short of economic data. Tomorrow, we get the minutes from the Federal Reserve's latest meeting, along with new home sales, consumer confidence. Wednesday, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, the PCE index, as well as consumer income, durable goods, also that weekly report on initial jobless claims. We have Dow futures leading the charge, up 0.7%, 317 points. S&P futures up 0.4%, 28 points. NASDAQ futures up 0.4%. or 94 points. The 2-year yield, 4.31%. That's down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.33%, and that's down 7 basis points. To currencies, we have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.5%. We have Japanese yen, euro, British pound stronger. And right now, Bitcoin just over 97,000. Few companies making news. Apple CEO Tim Cook, he's actually visiting China for at least the 3rd time this year, attending a suppliers conference. And sources say Sony developing this portable console that can play PS5 games, and that would rival the Nintendo Switch. And finally, the Financial Times says Goldman Funds set to write down almost $900 million on investments in troubled battery maker Northvolt. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. Wherever you get your podcasts, I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. On your commute, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Good morning on Sirius, Channel 121. We say good morning in the corridor from 92.9 Boston down to 99.1 Washington and Bloomberg 11.30, our flagship. We're in a holiday mood.
Yeah,
I'm trying.
Sure.
I'm not there yet. It sort of snuck up on me. Chart of the weekend, I saw it like 8 places. And that is basically guidance sentiment indicator has improved significantly. Like enthusiasm's literally off the chart. With a great chart hearkening to that at HSBC. Nicole Inouye joins us right now, U.S. and LATAM strategy. Nicole, I've never seen the certitude up like now. Am I right?
Oh, well, what we're seeing in terms of sentiment, so we looked at 3rd quarter earnings, and you're seeing what companies are saying about the future in terms of sentiment has improved across almost every single sector. So I think when we think about next year, when we think about where the S&P is trading, this is an earnings growth story. And what you're seeing is companies are very positive about the future. What you're not seeing analysts really revising higher earnings from here. So that earnings revision ratio has been pretty neutral. So I think that gives you a good positive sentiment going into next year.
You've got a nuance that Mag 7 is really doing quite well. Not off NVIDIA a couple days ago, but is there a general HSBC tone that Mag 7 leads the way?
Well, obviously Mag 7 led the way this year. And I think, looking at 3rd quarter, they also kind of led the way on earnings. You're still seeing earnings growth for that cohort of stocks of above 20%. But yeah, I think really for the market to do well, you need to see this broadening. And this is something that we've been recommending for quite some time, that we need to start broadening exposure. And when we look into next year, you have consensus EPS expectations of 15% and 12% for XMAX 7. So you're seeing kind of this XMAX 7 make a little bit of this comeback. So I think on a relative basis, you won't see as much of an outperformance of the Mag 7 because you will see these other sectors and other companies that still continue that will start performing better than what they had in the past. But you can't really completely disregard the Mag 7 story at this point.
So, Nicole, I love, and for our listeners and viewers here, in a research note, she's got a word cloud from U.S. 3rd quarter 2024 earnings. Very cool. And some of the words that jump out from the conference calls, hurricane was big, election was big, tariffs were big, but the hurricane was kind of out there a lot. Nicole, as you think about sector performance in 2025, given kind of the political backdrop that we now have, which is arguably different than what we've had for the prior 4 years, have you changed your outlook at all in terms of sectors or allocations?
Right. What we're telling investors, really prepare for policy change. The timing, the extent, the sequencing of that change, is still uncertain. But where we're saying to position in terms of sectors that we think will outperform, we like financials, we like tech, we like industrials. This is more on a pro-cyclical stance. And then I think that the sectors that we're a little bit more concerned on are the consumer sector. So your consumer discretionary, consumer staples. If we get these tariffs, these companies usually import a large part of their products, and you need to make that choice. Either you increase prices or you reduce margins, and we know a lot of these companies have pretty tight margins. So I think going to next year, I think that is a sector we're more concerned on. It was a sector that we were very positive on. And if we get this slower rate cutting cycle, then again also that should impact the consumer and keep the low end consumer in kind of more of a pinch.
valuation here, Nicole, how do you think about it? Because I know some folks are saying the earnings were good, but they weren't great. And now I got some valuation concerns here. How do you think about valuation abroad for this market here?
I would definitely say I think valuation is the big pushback, and it's difficult. You look at the S&P, 20% of the companies are trading at a PE of above 30 times. So this is the highest level we've seen even during the dot-com bubble back in 2000. So, and this is across sectors. So of course, tech is a big part of it, but you're seeing some consumer staples, you're seeing some financials trading at very high PEs. But I will say they're delivering on earnings. A lot of these companies have ROEs of 30% plus, very strong balance sheets. So, I'd say it's a headwind. And when we think about where we're going to see growth for next year and where we're going to see the equity market perform, re-rating starts to get very difficult, especially at these levels. Right. So it has to be more of an earnings growth story. And what we've been recommending also is you do have these stocks trading at very high valuations, but if you go downstream in different sectors, you also have very, high quality companies that are trading at more discounted valuations compared to these really, high valuation, premium valuation stocks.
We do economics, finance, investment, and international relations. Nicole Inouye, folks, holds a Bachelor of Science degree and without question the most prestigious international relations program in America. Nicole, what was it like popping foreign service at Georgetown? What an admit.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is what got me interested in Latin America. So the fact that I was able to study at Georgetown, the fact that I was able to study abroad in Latin America,
right.
And that's where a lot of my career has been, in Latin America. I think that's part of that was because I was able to study at Georgetown and be in this foreign service program. So.
Did you think about going to state, or is that just no fun anymore versus the rollicking good times at HSBC?
Well, I think I've always liked finance. I did an MBA as well, so I wanted something more linked to the quantitative and the finance aspect of the market. So that's why. So I think it's a good combination. You're able to combine, living in another country, speaking another language, and also working in finance. I think that's a special combination.
I did a thing with Lagarde at Walsh ages ago, and it's just an incredible program. Good morning, Russell Horowitz, who came out of that program as well, formerly at Bloomberg and Goldman Sachs. Nicole, thank you so much. Nicole, Inouye, had a U.S., had a LATAM. I didn't have time at HSBC. Paul, I didn't have time to get to the one chart off Rio. Is Gura back yet?
No. I mean,
I don't think Gura, Lisa.
He's on some beach.
Gura extended pretend. He extended a Copacabana extension.
Ipanema.
But China's taken over LATAM. We didn't get to talk. We got to get Nicole back on to talk about
what we heard from Damien Sassower, it's such a big part of the MSCI
global
index.
Yeah.
You have to play there. I mean, a lot of people say, it's uninvestable given the political backdrop. Yeah. But if you're an emerging markets investor, you got to be there to some extent.
Has there been a David Gura sighting?
No, I don't think
we haven't seen him.
He's going to come back all tan and
he's
bronzed.
worked from beach.
Yeah, he gets the work from beach. Yeah, he's had it for the year.
What's the hotel down there he stayed at? The Belmond, Copacabana?
Yeah.
He's in the hotel. Okay, thank you for that, Artie. Good to know. Futures up 30, up 29 right now. Dow up 306. It's a nice lift of the market. Small stocks. The Russell 2000 up a solid stick, 1%. Paul mentions it. VIX 17 over the last 3 Scott Bessent days. VIX prints, 14.96. Huge economic data on this Monday, this Tuesday, this Wednesday. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Apple CarPlay, your commute on YouTube, home, and office. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen. This is after incoming president named Scott Bessent for Treasury Secretary. So right now we have Dow futures leading the charge, up 0.7%, 327 points. S&P futures up 0.5%, 30 points. NASDAQ futures up 0.4%, or 102 points. Goldman Sachs says a year-end rally will start this week and push the S&P 500 to 6,200 points. We shall see. Well, heading over to the bond market. The two-year yield, 4.31%. That's down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.32%. That's down 8 basis points. To currencies, we have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.7%. The Japanese yen, euro up more than 1%. British pound up 0.6%. We have Bitcoin at around 97,000. Few companies making news. Intel, the New York Times reporting that Biden administration plans to reduce its CHIP Act funding from $8.5 billion to less than $8 billion. And Amazon building its own chip-making operation to turn data centers into AI machines and also reduce that reliance on NVIDIA. And quantum computing stocks, they're really gaining after Amazon Web Services announced this program to help customers get ready for quantum computing. So you have Rigetti Computing up 41%, D-Wave Quantum up 17%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Bloomberg Surveillance, our economic indicators, today a little light. Tomorrow, 47 lines.
Yes.
Wednesday, 87 lines. 3 days packed. Wednesday's nuts.
Yes. Core PCE is leading the way, Tom.
Leading the way for Jerome Powell and Paul Sweeney. Economic indicators, they're brought to you by CME Group, the world's leading derivatives marketplace. They offer the widest range of global benchmark products across all major asset classes. CME Group, where risk meets opportunities. You should see their seats at Wrigley Field. Just unbelievable. I never saw them. They're joining us now. Lauren Seidel-Baker, economist, ITR Economics. Lauren, I love your brief on purchasing power. Do corporations, to bring it back, do corporations have pricing power into 2025?
I think they do, and I think the real winners are the ones that are going to use their competitive advantages, have that good, better, best model, whatever they can do to take more price, because I'm a little bit in the contra category of expecting inflation to come back pretty strong by the latter half of 2025. I think we're starting to see some of those indicators turn up, starting to get a little bit more market acceptance. But I don't think the fight against inflation is as completely won as many folks would like for it to believe that it is, at least. So I think this is going to be a constant refrain we're hearing. The consumer is tired of these price increases, but if you can justify them, if you can put them through in different ways, I think that's going to be part of the margin game next year.
I want you to explain what ITR does. I mean, there's a legendary history here, but you're not doing like Wall Street sell-side economics. What exactly are you grinding out each and every day?
No, we are welcome from the dark side to the light side of economics, I like to say. We actually originated back in the aftermath of the Great Depression. Someone said, hey, we should have seen this coming. There must be indicators that tell us what the business cycle is doing. So that's what we do. We look at these indicators. We look at those long-term flows throughout history, and we really help businesses target what will be coming. As I mentioned, I think inflation is coming back next year in a way that I'm not sure the market has fully priced in yet. So we look at those leading fundamentals, and we just prepare businesses and individuals for what's coming next and what signposts can we read to really see it. It's not just guesswork and assumption.
I put it out this week. I was like, Jim Bianco. I think Mohammed's been on this. Mohammed Alarian at Cambridge. And Lindsay Piegza at Stifel. Same idea. Yep. Wait a minute. We're not going to 2%.
Exactly. So, Lauren, from your perspective, what's going to drive inflation higher? We spent the last couple of years working hard to get inflation down. What's going to push it higher in your mind?
Yes, and it still is moving in the right direction for now. I think for the end of this year into early 2025, we're certainly moving in that right direction, moving toward that magical 2% rate. But we do have some fundamental factors building behind the scenes, things like a lot of liquidity out there, especially if we look at something like gross Treasury issuance. We do have a lot of those fundamental drivers behind the scenes. If we separate this between the good side of inflation, which is relatively well under control right now, versus service sector, I just don't see any significant easing in the labor market that is going to keep wage disinflation trending in such a consistently low direction. It's just a demographics issue when it comes back to the labor market.
So do you assume ECI, the employee cost index, measuring wages and benefits, stays elevated?
I think it has to. We just don't have a glut of younger workers aging onto the scene, leaving school now. We also have very high labor force participation. So to me, that means fewer workers on the sidelines who could be dragged back into the labor force. I just don't see a lot of the tides opening, right, and the floodgates opening with all of these people, unless we have significant change, and I mean a wholesale change in AI making our folks more efficient, but we just haven't seen that labor productivity gain to this point.
So how is the consumer doing in your estimation?
Well, from that same perspective, this tight labor market that is keeping those wage costs higher, on the other side of that coin, that means more people working, more people making more money, and wages are still outpacing inflation. So when I talk about purchasing power, I see the consumer in a pretty healthy position. We are earning more even after inflation takes that bite out of our paychecks. Additionally, I think we have inflation fatigue. We'd like to complain about the price on the grocery store shelves, so to speak. But if you look at any real disposable inflation income, measures, we do find that the consumer is holding up relatively well. We have more money to spend. Now, that said, we're starting to see folks turn to the credit card a little bit more. We're starting to see folks maybe tap into savings to fuel some of that spending. But overall, we don't have any severe delinquency rates that concern me. We don't have any real subprime type of debt building up. So I think the consumer is on very stable ground, just not so amazingly positioned as we have been when we were getting stimulus checks a few years ago.
I featured on our promo to 92.9 FM Boston, Manchester, and of course Mount Washington, where it's 11 degrees this morning. You're from Manchester, New Hampshire. Lauren, I'm absolutely thunderstruck by this sub 3% unemployment rate-ish of New Hampshire, all blended in. Is it like that, or are there so many people removed from the labor force? Is it a legit sub 3% unemployment in New Hampshire?
New Hampshire, I love it. I haven't looked at our labor force participation rate lately, but it certainly feels that way. Especially, you mentioned Mount Washington, one of my favorite places in this world. I love hiking up there. Those tourist towns, North Conway, Lyngen, the high cost of living is just keeping, especially lower income folks, those service jobs from moving in. And so there is a real shortage of workers in some of those more expensive areas of the state. I'm talking Portsmouth, Manchester, Concord, right? We have a little bit more leeway here, but it certainly feels like a tight labor market. A lot of folks are having a lot of trouble hiring right now.
So a person walking on the street of Manchester, how do they feel about the economy there and kind of how they're doing? That's a part of the world we don't get to talk about too much.
No one comes to New Hampshire. I love this. But no, again, we do have more folks being employed today. So if you want a job, there's a pretty good chance in most sectors you're going to be able to find one. I think that sentiment is reflected out there. Now, not to say we don't have our own problems like anywhere in the world would, but there's at least that confidence that I can probably find something if I really want to and choose to. And again, wages are rising. We see it especially at the kind of lower end of the income spectrum, because it just doesn't take as much to make a bigger percent change. So we've seen a lot of wage growth here recently. We're seeing it with new stores, new retail popping up everywhere I look. So a lot of inflows, I would say, a lot of excitement here on the ground.
Lauren, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. Really, really interesting. Lauren Seidel-Baker from Manchester, New Hampshire. I mentioned this the other day. Coldest I've ever been is Plymouth, New Hampshire, 21 below zero.
Ooh,
It's just ridiculous.
I just have memories skiing
insane.
at Killington with my father underneath this makeshift blanket they used to give me. It used to give you on the chairlifts, and just unbelievably cold.
Yes, they would do that. And then you roll down the mountain.
Some hardy people up there.
To the pickup barrel.
Yep.
And The Wobbly Barn. John Tucker shut down the Wobbly Barn 3 consecutive days.
They actually remember Tom from the Wobbly Barn on the Access Road to Killington. He's legendary.
Charities.
There. Yeah.
Frank Chase killing it at the Mountain Inn. Real talent. Incredible piano player.
Some good
I remember the blankets on the chairlift there.
Oh,
good luck with
and they were
that.
basically frozen solid, but you put it over you, and they were rough. I think they were surplus Army blankets from World War II, as my dad was telling me.
And what's worse is there's other mountains where it's like Cannon. It's like basically the wind. It's up in New Hampshire, folks. And the mountain is actually pivoted exactly to where the wind hits you. I was up at Jay Peak once, and the middle child almost blew off the cliff. I'm laying down, holding on to the middle child. She's like 10 years old. And she's almost the winds it's ridiculous.
That's skiing in the east,
ladies.
It's a hardy.
Where do we go in the west, wise one?
I got my first Wall Street bonus in 1987, and I haven't skied east since. So we just go Colorado, Utah, California.
Which do you prefer?
This year we're going to Steamboat.
Steamboat?
Yeah, first time I've been there 15
Western
years.
Colorado.
Yeah.
Where actually Cowboys are Cowboys.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
futures, they improve off this chit-chat, up 34 with our news in New York City. King of the Wobbly Barn, Killington, John Tucker.
All right, hedge fund chief Scott Bessent is Donald Trump's nominee to become the next Treasury Secretary. Let's find out more in this report from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
Bessent runs the macro hedge fund Keene Group, and he has deep familiarity with global financial systems and currency markets. Many of Bessent's views are well known, particularly his 3-3-3 policy, cutting the budget deficit to 3% of GDP by 2028, spurring GDP growth of 3% through deregulation, and producing an additional 3 million barrels of U.S. crude oil per day. He's also talked about a phased-in approach to tariffs and extending Trump's tax cuts. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
The Biden administration trying to clinch a ceasefire in the Middle East before it leaves office. Now, Israel's ambassador to the U.S. says his country is close to an agreement with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Michael Herzog telling Israel's Army Radio it could happen within days. A DHL cargo plane flying from Germany to Lithuania has crashed close to Vilnius airport, killing a crew member and injuring 3 others. Although no cause of the crash has been listed, European and U.S. intelligence officials, you'll recall, had previously warned that Russia may be plotting to plant incendiary devices on planes. This is a Boeing 737-400. It took off from the eastern German city of Leipzig, crashed during approach, and was attempting an emergency landing. The aircraft went down close to a residential home in the Lithuanian capital. And the International Climate Summit, that has ended. Nearly 200 countries agreed to triple the amount of money available to help developing countries confront rapidly warming temperatures. Wicked and Gladiator 2, two of the year's most anticipated films, bringing in a combined $170 million in U.S. and Canadian theaters this weekend, kicking off what's likely to be a pretty strong holiday season for the cinemas. Speaking of which, so theater chains, they're trying to differentiate themselves in an attempt to attract more moviegoers, so they're delivering lots of tchotchkes and experiences you just can't get on your couch. We're talking about $40 Emerald City popcorn buckets for Wicked fans.
Shocking. Positively shocking.
In the past year, don't ask me why. Collectible buckets, immersive screenings with its motion-enabled chairs and themed events have exploded in popularity. So you got to do something to bring the people into the
Where
theater.
is that from? Shocking.
I believe that was James Bond.
Lisa, but it hit your
when Rich came
charge
into the
account.
newsroom this morning, he found no copy.
It hit your bank account this weekend. What did you spend out on?
It did, and then I had to pay for my daughter's friends too.
Yeah,
I got roped into that one.
3 figures?
Yes. We're going 4.
Why are they not serving liquor in the theaters?
Oh, they
I mean,
do
that
in
would-
some.
Oh,
Yes.
they
Yeah,
do.
they do.
Okay.
Yes,
Now we're
the
talking.
ones that
That would
have the
finally
meals.
get me back to the
They have
movie
a bar
theater.
outside of one of them. That would get you through it. Yes.
Thank you for that report. In our next hour, John Tucker again on Wicked in the $40 popcorn bucket. What you need to know is the market advances through the morning. Futures up 28. Now futures up 35 at the VIX in a Paul Sweeney under 15, 14.87. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lise Mateo. Futures pointing to a higher open. This as investors seem to approve of President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Treasury Secretary, as Scott Bessent seen as tough on government spending, but also more balanced on tariffs. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.6%, 144 points. Dow futures up 0.8%, 353 points. S&P futures up 0.6%, or 38 points. We have the two-year yield, 4.31%. That's down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.32%. That's down 8 basis points. To commodities, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.6%. We have the Japanese yen, euro, British pound stronger. We have for commodities, we have Brent crude $74 a barrel, WTI crude $70 a barrel. As far as Bitcoin, just over 97,000. And speaking of which, MicroStrategy brought another $5.4 billion in Bitcoin, making its third acquisition this month. MicroStrategy up 4%. And shares of Bath & Body Works now up 19%. Solid third quarter results. And shares of Target up 1.5%. It was added back to Oppenheimer's pick list after being removed last month. And since we mentioned Scott Bessent earlier, I found this news. His house in Charleston, South Carolina, up for sale. But you're going to need about $22 million to buy it. 9,400 square feet, 8 bedrooms, and 4 full bars. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
That's probably right in the water there, that little row.
Low country
it is on the water.
The row there, it looks like a set from Gone with the Wind.
Yep. The low country down there's just water everywhere. And it's usually calm. It's great for boating. It's just.
I had an offspring went to
awesome.
College of the Charleston.
Yes. Awesome.
Terrific education.
Yep.
Like seriously good.
Yep.
Success. Joining us right now on what we're not talking about, Wendy Schiller joins us. She's been she gets lots of email, love notes, hate mail. They love Professor Schiller, Brown University. Wendy, nobody's paying attention to the House. And the bottom line is Speaker Johnson of Louisiana replaced Mr. McCarthy of Bakersfield, who was kicked out the door. Is there a conservative wing of the majority Republicans in the House that are going to boot the Speaker of the House out the door?
Well, so far, he's got the umbrella of cover of Donald Trump, right? So he's been loyal to Trump. Trump seems to be supporting him, came to the Capitol, talked to the Republican caucus. So I think it's a very different ball game. And this is what I think some of the firebrands in the House will now get used to again, to have their party's president in the White House and to create instability in the House, particularly in the beginning of the Trump term. I don't think will go over all that well with Donald Trump.
Is the Tea Party dead? I read like 8 articles. The Tea Party's dead. What replaced the Tea Party? I think of Rand Paul of Kentucky, but Professor Schiller, what replaced the Tea Party? Who are those radicals in the House?
Well, I mean, I don't think the Tea Party is dead. It morphed, it transformed. It led by Mark Meadows in particular. You know, the Freedom Caucus, Jim Jordan, the Freedom Caucus replaced the Tea Party and has been a vocal wing on the size of the federal government and the deficit in particular. That's where they seem to really exert their power, debt ceiling, limits and raising the debt ceiling, spending. That's where they've held out, and they've gotten some pretty significant concessions. And the Tea Party started, as you remember, with a single rant, but then morphed into deficit spending and anti-Obamacare. So the question for us is, will they raise the specter of repealing Obamacare again under the guise of money? And that's going to be a headache for Johnson. 40 states are now participating in Obamacare one way or the other. That's a headache for them. So will they raise the flag again on spending? And will they do it under a Trump presidency version 2?
So, Professor, it seems like, just judging by the pre-market activity here, the market's kind of like this Scott Bessent fellow for Treasury. But there are still some nominations that are out there that I think are going to be a little bit more challenging in terms of getting confirmation when you think about Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr. or Hegseth and folks like that. What role do you think the Republicans in the Senate are going to do in terms of challenging perhaps some of these more conflicted candidates?
Well, Paul, I think John Thune's been pretty strategic, pretty clever so far, sort of staying under the radar, but insisting on confirmation hearings. So now the coverage of the Hill is all about when the confirmation hearings happen rather than if they will happen. So recess appointments, controversial. They're not the best way to run the rodeo when you want to reform the entire federal government. You need some stability. So I think Thune's making the case that if you really want to get your aims done, you need the confirmation process to have the Senate stamp of approval. And so far, that's sitting well with Donald Trump. The Hegseth nomination is the one to watch, I think, because people like Joni Ernst, who's up for re-election in Iowa in 2 years, she's been big on sexual assault. Whether, in fact, she starts to derail or defect on that nomination is the next thing I'm looking for. Rand Paul came out quite lately and said, don't want to use the military for domestic law enforcement on removal of people who are undocumented. That is a big shot across the bow. And as Tom just said, Rand Paul is sort of the product of the Tea Party movement. So in that case, the overreach of the federal government on immigration may push the party into conflict on things that are domestic policy.
So I guess the question here is, what happens, what should we be paying attention to between now and Inauguration Day for this incoming administration?
Certainly this particular, if Rand Paul goes there, Mike Lee might go there. If Mike Lee goes there, maybe Ted Cruz, maybe not goes there. The question is, Trump wants to use and really expand executive power, and he wants to have the military involved some way or the other. Right. And that's posse comitatus, as Tom was talking about last time. That's a federal law, right? That's more than 100 years old, 150 years old almost. So now we're looking at sort of the first conflict. And I think that's, Paul, what I'm looking at here is, do the hearings get a little dragged down by Trump's proclamation that he wants to use the military? That's what I'm looking at, and that affects Hegseth, it affects Gabbard, and even Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Right. So I think these are the things I'm looking at in the next couple of weeks.
Professor Schiller, in terms of your study of history back pre-Revolutionary War, the marginal issue here, I'm serious, the marginal issue is, will government act marginally and slowly, as the Treasury Secretary designate has suggested, or are we going to see the magnitude that Trump and MAGA want? What's your likelihood that we see bold magnitude versus a more marginal approach a la the Treasury Secretary?
The statements will be bold magnitude, and the product will be very gradual, because the bureaucracy, as you know, pretty much invented by Thomas Jefferson. That's where we got the name, bureau, lots of drawers, bureaucracy. I think that's what you're going to see. You're going to see lots of statements, but moving this behemoth that is the federal government is a very slow and difficult process. Even Ronald Reagan couldn't be as successful as he wanted. He couldn't get rid of the Department of Education, for example. So I think you'll see lots of broad statements. I think the impact will be slow, but the problem with the Republicans, if it's too slow, you bump right up against 2026. Right. So the Republicans need to get whatever pain is going to happen has to happen this year, not next year.
Professor, thank you so much. Wendy Schiller with us from Brown University at Taubman Center. We're talking about international relations in Georgetown. Brown has that real history with the leadership of people like Bill Rhodes and others. Paul, we got a market and a move. I mean, we just got to talk. We would be good. Like, if this was the 10 o'clock hour, folks, we wouldn't be talking BitDog. Where's BitDog right now? 98,000. Yep. So what? Look at equities. I mean, it's a celebration. It's a liftoff.
It is. I mean, the S&P.
It's a melt up.
It's a melt up. S&P up 0.7%. The Dow about 0.8%. Same for NASDAQ. So definitely moving there big time. Yields coming in, Tom. The 10-year Treasury, it's in about 8 basis points. We're sitting there right at 4.31% on your 10-year. Your 2-year right at 4.3%. So absolutely, we're not inverted yet, but we're right there.
10-year real yield was a 2.1718. It's come in under 2%.
Okay.
Just barely 1.99% over the last number of days, the weeks say. But it's in nicely today, 1.99%. What do we make of oils? Somebody came out, one of the firms came out, I think I'll say Goldman. Right. I can't remember. OMG, cheap oil.
Right.
And McGlone's been there forever.
Yeah, he has been. He thinks it hits 40 or 50 before it hits, 150. And, what I keep hearing about and reading about, Tom, on the oil, it's just the demand. There's really a question of demand, particularly coming out of China. We know what the supply picture is. It's there, but it's a question of demand.
Lisa called me up this weekend. She said, I need rock the music. So we did Moana 1. Coming out Wednesday, first in line will be Lisa Mateo. There we are, Moana 2. This is the rock song from Moana 2.
Who are you? Who are you? Who are you gonna be? You
you're gonna make some history. Come on, Moana, go get your destiny. Can I get a, can I get a, can I get a? You gotta, you wanna, you need to level up. Go show 'em, tell them enough's enough. Come on, Moana, go get your destiny. Can I get a, let me hear it, can I get a? This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
I'm sorry, it's a boom economy, and that's what we're adjusting to.
Neither party seems to want to take on deficits at all.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off another record high.
And Michael Barr with news. Tensions over Israel's war with Hamas continue to grow. The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr on assignment. Many questions about Michael Barr. I think we're looking for, he's coming back next week. It has to do with Detroit and their scheduling, and they won. And, you know,
some special work with the Lions.
I'm not handling this. Michael Barr's people just said, Tom, calm down. You know, I said, okay, Barr, we're looking for next week return, particularly if the Lions win. Lisa Mateo dropped by this morning. Yes, we're doing The Rock, and I've had a lot of comments like, Moana, really? And
let's keep the day job as an actor. I'm not sure about the singing thing.
No, I don't know. It proves once and for all, but Lisa's running the show. That's what we know for sure. What's running the data check right now is markets up. I'm not going to use melt up. I think that's inflammatory, but I'm sorry. The vector's in the up direction, Paul, from plus 28 to plus 41 on S&P futures.
Yeah, exactly right, Tom. And again, I guess, you know, kind of the feeling is that the markets like this Treasury Secretary selection, this nomination of Mr. Bessent, and we'll see how it plays out. But I guess it's just I guess what I've read coming off the street is a safe bet, a calming bet. Maybe we're getting some reaction from markets from that.
There's a headline out, and Scott Bessent in the control room said the same thing. He didn't know Kodak was traded. Kodak halt news pending. They're still in Rochester, New York. Long ago and far away, they had 145,000 employees.
Yep.
I think like 20,000 just at Kodak Park where they made the film. Now they have 4,000 employees.
Yeah, KODK is the ticker symbol. So we'll have to see news pending. But there's a name that, again, blast from the past, Eastman Kodak.
What is this? They provide disruptive technologies?
Wow.
Explain that.
I have no idea. We'll see what happens. We'll get that latest report.
We'll get that.
Bloomberg News.
News pending there on Kodak. Talk about it. I feel like, you know, coming up, we'll talk at Anaconda Copper as well. Futures up 41 right now. Good morning on your commute across America. Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. Good morning on Sirius. Huge response on Sirius. Thank you for that. And on the quarter, 99.1 FM Washington, up through our flagship, Bloomberg 1130, November 1st. Sun out today again. A little chillier.
Good. Yep.
But did you get rain?
We did, thankfully.
We got much needed rain.
Yes, we did, thankfully.
Yes, we did. And up to 92.9 FM Boston. Right to it. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Melt-Up Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. Futures advancing this morning. Traders, like Paul was saying, embracing President-elect Donald Trump's pick of Scott Bessent as positive for the economy. So right now we have NASDAQ futures up 0.7%, 156 points. Dow futures up 0.8%, 367 points. S&P futures up 0.6%, or 40 points. We have the 2-year yield, 4.31%. That's down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.31%, and that's down 8 basis points. We have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.7%. We have the Japanese yen stronger, euro up more than 1%. We have British pound stronger, Bitcoin now over 97,000. That's after almost touching 100,000 last week. Shares of Macy's, they fell as much as 8% in pre-market this morning. Now they're down about 1%. Said it's delaying its third quarter earnings, investigating the single employee who's accused of hiding up to $154 million in delivery expenses. So the reason for that little shift in shares could be that the preliminary results in comparable sales, they were better than expected. So now investors starting to focus on that. Commerce Bank stock down 5% in Germany. Investors betting that UniCredit's $10.6 billion bid for Banco BPM shows the interest in the German bank starting to cool. Banco shares up more than 3% in Italy. And finally, two of the nation's biggest makers of building materials joining forces. Quikrete struck a $9.2 billion deal to acquire Summit Materials. Summit shares down nearly 2%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. The way this works, folks, is Paul and I really never know who's going to be on the show. We massively delegate authority. I figured out years ago it's the only way to do it. And what I do, the team of bookers we have, I don't know who's going to call me, but usually with a beverage of my choice in my hand, I get a call like at 7 p.m.
Sure.
And about 2 weeks ago, I said, could you get Bill Lee on from Milken? And it went through the booking combine we have here.
Yep.
And Eric delivered in spades. Joining us now, William Lee, Chief Economist, Milken Institute. Bill, this could be a 3-hour conversation. Let's cut it short. What do Trump tariffs mean for Beijing?
Oh, it's going to mean a change of life from where it was for the last 4 years. One of the things we have to remember, Tom, is that the Make America Great objective has really one ultimate objective: maximize domestic employment and income. Right? That is the feature that we have to keep in mind, and Beijing really realizes that. Up until now, President Biden has been emphasizing getting everybody together in trade pacts, multilateral trade pacts. He's had some difficulties negotiating them. But Donald Trump is a deal maker, and he goes for not only bilateral deals with countries, he goes for bilateral deals with companies. So I think Beijing is preparing itself for a whole bunch of company-specific deals, sector-specific deals, and I think that gives him flexibility. You can really tailor, that same industry. You can negotiate with Korea, and you can negotiate with Taiwan on semiconductors, and have two different deals that try to benefit both. So I just came back from a meeting in South Korea not so long ago, and they were really excited about having more and more U.S.-China trade tensions because they trade with both sides.
Okay,
and these bilateral deals will let them do that.
You're on the IMF desk as you were for years. What about magnitude? Lighthizer and Trump want magnitude large tariffs. The Treasury Secretary designate does not. Does it make a difference if Bill Lee gets a marginal or a massive tariff regime?
Well, Tom, as you know, as a deal maker, the one thing you never negotiate is your final position. And right now, the opening round is massive prohibitive tariffs. In fact, we had heard him say, if it takes 100%, great. If it takes 200%, I'm going to put them in. But that's the negotiating opening ploy. And what the objective, as I said before, is to restructure trade routes, restructure trade pacts, and restructure the U.S. manufacturing base in a way that replicates more supply chains domestically and friendshoring. And these tariffs are one way of negotiating that. Remember, Tom, restructuring America is both a Democratic and Republican objective, right, to maximize that domestic income and employment. And I think President Trump is going to be using trade policy as a tool. As you know, Tom, I come from a tradition of Bob Mundell and Carlos Rodriguez and BMO Calvo, where in a distorted world, and Kelvin Lancaster's world of the second best, where you don't have free trade, putting on tariffs or renegotiating industrial policy can make countries better off because we come in a distorted world where there is no free trade. There is no perfect competition.
So where is the concept of free trade? Was it ever a reality, and is it now gone for the foreseeable future?
If you go back to the days of Alexander Hamilton, right, he already put the stake in the heart of free trade when he said, we've got to build up U.S. industries. We cannot depend on the UK for manufactured goods. That alone, I think, goes to show that we never had that world of free trade. It was only taught by people like me when in international economics and undergrads to give you a baseline model for where it is that we could drive for. But I think the minute you hit graduate school, you learn about the world of the second best, where in a world of distortions, adding on a distortion can actually make the world better off than before. And I think Donald Trump has been saying that all along, and President Biden has been too. The CHIPS Act and the subsidies that we've been giving to build plants in Arizona for TSMC to come here was the lesson that we learned from COVID, that we cannot depend on one source for supply chains. My former boss, Jane Fraser said at a Milken meeting, the problem with ESG is that we're missing some S's. We need some stability and safety and soundness to our supply chains. And I think that's the heart of the message that President Trump is also trying to emphasize.
How valid is the argument that tariffs are inflationary on the U.S. consumer?
Well, Paul, I guess I hate to be the econ teacher again, but a tariff, even with retaliations, a stepwise increase in price levels. Right? In order to get inflation, we need continuous increases in the price level. And so we can have higher prices, but not higher inflation due to tariffs, unless we have repeated rounds of retaliation.
Dr. Lee, and I'm going to get a little nerdy here, folks. The people that invented this, again out of Columbia, was Professor Barrow, and a guy named Xavier Saleh Martin, who wore the bright, that's where Dan Ives got the sport coat thing going, is the sport coats of Saleh Martin. And their work is that in America, the people hammered by trade converge towards where the better part of America is. Now, we have a Trump of grievance, a Trump of so many people in America have missed the boat on free trade. Is that academics, Bill Lee, still in place, or is it a new regime after Barrow, Saleh Martin?
I think we combine both of those elements, because one thing that we also have to remember is there's technological change. And shaping technological change is one way of converging trade theory and growth theory. Technology gives us the opportunity to produce, as Mike Milken once told me, Bill, it's cheaper to produce sneakers in Atlanta than it is in China if you have the right technology in place. And so I think one of the things that we're going to see is the use of technology to drive a lot of the industrial policy that both President Biden and President Trump want to do, which is to say reshape the supply routes, don't depend on single sources, where their efficiency comes at a cost, and at a cost not just to the U.S. but to Europe as well. And I think Europe and the United States are trying to replicate these supply chains. If I were China, I'd be more afraid of the European tariffs that they're going to be putting in to protect their auto industries and their industrial base, their pharmaceuticals, than the United States tariffs. Because I think President Trump is much more willing to negotiate. You bring jobs to the United States, you invest in the United States, and you can circumvent our tariffs. If you don't do that and try to insist on competing with our strategic industries, you're going to be hit with not just 50, but 100% tariffs.
We went too long. Bill Lee, don't be a stranger. We'll do this again soon. With the Milken Institute, right to it with our news in New York City, John Tucker.
And investors believe the choice of Scott Bessent to be Treasury Secretary is going to inject more stability into the economy and financial markets. Let's get more from Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw.
As a hedge fund manager, he's sort of deep in that sort of Wall Street world and has a pretty good reputation among his colleagues for someone who understands how markets work. And so I do think that there is a pretty big sigh of relief from investors to say at least there's going to be, someone in the room who can speak for the markets. And the pick also suggests that Trump is eager to find ways to make sure that the markets approve of what he's doing.
Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw adds that Bessent has called for a gradual approach to implementing trade restrictions. The International Climate Summit has ended after a bitter fight. There's a deal on climate finance. More from Bloomberg's Gina Cervetti.
Nearly 200 countries agreed to triple the amount of money available to help developing countries confront rapidly warming temperatures. But the deal reached at the close of the two-week COP29 summit in Azerbaijan resulted from fractious and at times openly hostile negotiations, producing an agreement that even its supporters may see as insufficient and disappointing. Rich countries have pledged to provide at least $300 billion annually by 2035 through a wide variety of sources, including public finance as well as bilateral bilateral and multilateral deals. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
And a White House holiday tradition taking place today. This one involves turkeys. There's debate over when the first presidential turkey pardon actually occurred. Some historians actually say it could go all the way back to Abraham Lincoln. His son Tad befriended a turkey, successfully lobbied his father to save it from ending up as dinner at the White House. Turkey news.
There's a turkey over in the East River in Roosevelt Island. It's all over Twitter. They're protecting it right now.
Okay.
Like people are they're on turkey watch to protect the turkey. It's like a live turkey walking
around. You go
around.
a few miles south where I live, that turkey wouldn't stand a chance.
Yeah.
You've never
put you've never put the Mossberg 12 gauge out the kitchen window, have you?
Well,
no, come on.
Sure, why not?
your kids are like, oh, what's this? Oh, it's
buckshot.
A little buckshot. Thanksgiving at the Tucker House. Stay with us if you choose. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this features report sponsored by IBKR. Markets never sleep, and neither does Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indices, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. All right, we've got futures advancing on this holiday shortened trading week. It's not short, though, of economic data. Tomorrow, we get the minutes from the Federal Reserve's latest meeting, along with new home sales, consumer confidence. And then Wednesday, it's the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, yes, the PCE index, as well as consumer income, durable goods, and also that weekly report on initial jobless claims. So we have Dow futures leading the gains up 0.9%, 401 points. The NASDAQ futures up 0.9% as well, 189 points. S&P futures up 0.7% or 46 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.31%. That's down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.30%, and that's down 9 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.6%. We have the Japanese yen, euro, British pound stronger. And over to commodities, we have Brent crude down more than 1.5% at $73 a barrel. WTI crude $69 a barrel, and spot gold down more than 2% at $2,652 an ounce. Companies making news: Robert Bosch reducing the working hours of about 10,000 employees. That's in addition to job cuts. That's in order to counter that demand slump. And Apple CEO Tim Cook visiting China for at least the 3rd time this year. Meanwhile, Morgan Stanley growing a little bit more positive on the company's AI-infused iPhones. It shares up about 0.7%. And sources say Sony developing that portable console that can play PlayStation 5 games, and that would be some competition for Nintendo's Switch. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. A discussion with someone where all of global Wall Street leans forward. Ian Lyngen is with BMO Capital. And, of course, on the bond markets, you got Belsky's optimism on equities, all that. Ian Lyngen on the Bessent effect right now. Ian, thank you so much for joining. Do you have a vector in place, as you did 9 months ago, of a 10-year yield that will slide below 4%?
Yes, I still see the path of least resistance for 10-year yields being lower, not higher. And I think that the decision about the Treasury Secretary has been appropriately read as a net positive for the bond market. I think that this particular move does have a little bit further to run, but I don't see 10s going to 5. I see us going below 4%.
4.29% right now is a handle on 10-year yield, Paul.
Exactly, Tom. So, Ian, how do you think this Fed is going to proceed here with this December meeting coming up here? Given some of the economic data that we've seen already, we're going to get some PCE data later this week on Wednesday. How do you think this Fed's going to move here?
Well, I do think they're going to cut 25 basis points in December. They also are going to offer a new updated dot plot. And I think that that's the biggest risk. And that's because the debate in the market at the moment is whether or not terminals should be revised higher simply because of the results of the election. The Fed has told us that it's too soon for such a change. And so I suspect that the market will get a dovish cut, if nothing else.
How about going forward here? I mean, again, as you mentioned, the election has had a material impact on this market and on the economic outlook of a lot of participants in this market. How do you think the election may or may not impact kind of where this Fed goes?
Well, at a minimum, the Fed has already acknowledged it's in the process of normalizing rates. And there's a very big difference from the Fed's perspective between normalizing and easing. The economic data is on reasonably strong footing, so they don't have any urgency to move back to neutral. However, it won't be until the second half of next year that any potential policy change could come from the FOMC based on what Trump does early in his presidency. Yeah. And it is worth noting that there's tariffs are one-off increases, and they're not the type of demand inflation that the Fed worries about.
Leon, the heart of your note, and folks, it's the densest note on fixed income on Wall Street, acclaimed by all. Buried in it is looming month-end bond demand. Is it foreign appetite? Is it domestic? Is it Fidelity or BlackRock need to touch up their portfolios? What do you mean by looming month-end demand, price up, yield down?
Well, it was a refunding month. And so that means that we'll have new bonds being added to the benchmark index, which implies that even someone who wants to be neutral on duration is going to need to buy into the end of the month. That's true for real money domestic players, and that's true for any overseas buyers that are based off of a benchmark. As a theme, though, we do tend to think of looming month-end demand being more of a domestic affair as opposed to being a strong overseas story.
So stepping back here, what was your take when you see the nomination of Scott Bessent for Treasury Secretary? Is it as simple as, well, there's an adult in the room and maybe take a more measured, look towards tariffs? Kind of what do you think the market's discounting here?
Well, I think that was the knee-jerk response. And the perception is that he will be a more balanced, methodical, thoughtful Treasury Secretary than might have otherwise been at risk. And there's also this observation that he's already made about taking a gradual approach on the tariff side. And if he's successful in being able to orchestrate that, that could take a lot of the shock and a lot of the tension out of the process as we recalibrate on the global trade stage.
Link your tone of price up, yield down with Belsky's tone of a solid equity market. Is it just, Ian, our underestimation of continued ample real GDP and surprisingly good animal spirits is signaled by nominal GDP?
Well, I think that the case for outperformance of the equity market can be made, and I'm on board with Belsky's expectations. If we're going to be moving to a familiar, doesn't have to be particularly lower rate environment, but if we don't have a spike in 10 and 30-year rates, then equities can continue to grind higher from here. My biggest worry for risk assets is that we do see a spike in term premium, a spike in break-evens, and more reflationary angst that gets us to an October 2023 moment where we saw that correction lower in stocks.
See how Ian did that? I mean, Brian, for next year, he's only going to be called Belsky. It's like Cher.
Exactly.
It's just like Belsky.
Yep.
It's just this
We'll all know.
one word. Ian Lyngen, thank you so much. What a team it is.
Thank you.
At BMO Capital Markets, and there are many different parts. The Bank of Montreal, of course, BMO Capital Markets. This is what surveillance is about. We have Ian Lyngen for you, and coming up in moments, Francis Donald of RBC. It's a Canadian moment here.
Nice. All right. In studio. How about that?
Francis Donald in the building.
Yep.
Hugely popular on the separation, not the Luddite, but the two parts of the American economy. Then we're going to bring you somebody on sophisticated bonds I don't understand, who's world acclaimed. John Devaney will be with us as well. Paul, Kodak. Here's what happened, and I lived this, folks.
Mm-hmm.
They, to a great extent, invented the modern retirement system of defined benefit, traditional plan, in a strange thing that they call profit sharing, but the government said they couldn't call it profit sharing because it really wasn't profit sharing like, we know 401k. They sort of, did this out of World War II. The company's been blown up, 4,000 employees, and they're selling off the excess of 30, 40, 50, 70 years of defined benefit success to fancy people like the MasterCard Foundation.
Yep.
I have no idea what I just said, but
I'm just saying, Kodak estimates the pension would have surplus assets of between $885 million and $975 million after the satisfaction of liabilities. So they have excess.
They have excess pensions. My parents wanted their piece of it, but they never got it. Kodak considering options for pension, including the termination of an ancient defined benefit plan. And we thank Alicia Wendell of Boston College, who was with us here recently. She retires here, although she'll stay as a consultant to what she invented, the retirement analysis research program, I should say, at BC. The market, it's a Sweeney melt-up. Come on, we're up 0.9%. NASDAQ 100. It can't get better.
We've got coffee climbing, Tom, to the highest since 1997.
I know.
That explains a lot of stuff.
It's an outrage. We'll talk about that. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this opening bell report brought to you by JP Morgan Asset Management. Stay informed on today's fastest growing investment vehicle with a new guide to ETFs. Visit jpmorgan.com/ETF insights to learn more. All right, how are the markets going to kick things off this holiday shortened trading week, which is not short of economic data? Tomorrow we get the minutes from the Federal Reserve's latest meeting, new home sales, consumer confidence, and then Wednesday, yes, that focus shifts to the PCE index. Let's see how things shape up. We'll start with the S&P 500, up 0.5%, 35 points at 6,003. The Dow up 0.7%, 337 points at 44,628. The Nasdaq up 0.7%, 141 points at 19,144. We head to the 2-year yield, 4.29%. That's down 7 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's down 11 basis points. We head over to commodities, where we have Brent crude down about 1.5%, $73 a barrel. WTI crude, $69 a barrel. We have spot gold down more than 2.5% at $2,643 an ounce. And finally, to currencies with the Bloomberg's dollar spot index down 0.7%. Japanese yen stronger, euro up more than 1% at 105.27 against the dollar. We have the British pound stronger as well, and Bitcoin just over 97,000. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
West Texas Intermediate 69.94 down a dollar as well this morning. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. Dow up 355 points. I love doing seminars with Frances Donald of the Royal Bank of Canada. She writes a very terse note, always wrapped around the core function Y equals C plus I plus G plus export-import dynamics. She darkens the door today, visiting us from Montreal as well. Nominal GDP to me has been the great miscall this year. Mm-hmm. Can you, with your K-shaped theme, with the American exceptionalism, with the Bessent Treasury Secretary celebration, can you model nominal GDP above 5% 12 months forward?
Oh, well, that'll depend on the size, scope, timing, and sequencing of a whole lot of policies that are going to come down the lane.
Or will they be delayed?
Will they be delayed? And, in my almost 2 decades of doing this, I know that I can't rely on Washington probabilities to dictate my economic forecast. What we do know is the direction of a lot of policies that are going to come in and maybe skew our forecasts. And problematically, Tom, some of them are growth positive, deregulation, corporate tax cuts, and some of them are growth negative. Things like tariffs, or even, and we don't talk about it enough, immigration policies and the risks to lower labor supply. So at the end of 2025, depending on the sequencing, we could very much have an economy that's doing quite well, where animal spirits have helped lift confidence and small business confidence, which I'm acutely focusing on, and the Fed will have to be thinking about hikes, not cuts. The flip side of that is if the sequencing is different, we could see us trip this soft landing and have a Fed that continues to focus on cuts. And that's not me not having conviction in a forecast, refusing to make a call. It's me acknowledging that the tails around our calls are much fatter, and every corporate, every household, every market participant has to take a look at a broader set of scenarios now than they were a couple months ago.
With some hindsight here to the labor data, what has the migrant influx of people into this country over the last several years, what has it meant for the labor market and our economy? Because now it's front and center yet again, but maybe on the other side.
This is such an important question, and thank you for asking it, because I'm frankly more focused on immigration policy than I am on tariffs.
Okay.
Tariffs are a price level shock. We got a playbook for tariffs. We generally know what happened. Every economist with their salt knows a ton about washing machines from 2018, but that's not what's going to keep an economist up at night. That's a one-time inflation shock. What worries us is labor supply shortages and persistent wage growth. That's the type of more nefarious inflation that creeps in and requires much higher interest rates. And we are heading into a period where we expect to see, we've already seen record retirements. We have 3 retirees for every 1 new entrant looking for work in the United States. It is really skewed.
Why is that? What's the why on that stunning statistic?
It's just demographics, Tom. People get older and they retire.
Post-COVID? No, they do? Really?
That's what happens. It's hard for us to accept. But no, it's demographics. And my whole life demographics is something that we thought about as being relevant over a 5, 10, 20-year horizon. It is relevant in 2025. It's also why that unemployment rate is staying very low. It's mechanically pushing down, and it puts pressure on the Fed.
Paul, Dow up 1%, up 450 points. NASDAQ up, SPX up 0.7%. Just Apple is one model up $2.50. We call that 2 5/8.
Okay,
in the old days, 232.
Talk to us about this K-shaped economy. What does it mean to you, and how problematic is it for the broader economy out there?
Well, it depends who you are, but one of the big challenges over the past year is if you were running any type of model based off of a data point like the ISM or consumer confidence, which weights every participant in that survey equally, you and I get the same weight. It looked recessionary, and that's because small businesses and low-income households have been in a very real recession. It's not just sentiment, it's not just that they have bad expectations, but any data point that actually captured the economy as a whole that was in real dollars looked worked just fine. And the trap was focusing on those standard indicators that weighted everybody equally, because high-income households and large corporations, they are the drivers of what happens next. If you're the Fed, this is a problem, though, because you really would need two monetary policies to help those who are struggling and require much lower rates, and then the resilient CEOs, the large households, or large companies, they actually could probably merit rates around 4% or above. So the Fed's going to have to make a choice. Does it target the aggregate of the economy and let one element lag behind more significantly than it has in the past? Or does it say we actually need to be a little bit, quote unquote, fairer in the way that we look at this? I think the challenge is that inflation runs off of the aggregate, not the individual. This is going to continue to muck up a lot of our statistics and a lot of our models, but at least now there's more of a general realization of why standard economic models hasn't worked for us in the past year or two.
Scott Bessent, nominated to be Treasury Secretary. The markets seem to like it this morning. As an economist, do you read anything into it, or are you kind of thinking more just bigger picture?
All I want is less uncertainty. We are still in a massive uncertainty shock. Even though we know the outcome of the election, we still don't have a good sense of what the next 1 to 2 years is going to look like. So this is one of these weeks we're getting a huge amount of economic data, and I almost don't care, because I'm looking for clarity on politics next.
Don't say that. We need people to tune in at least through Wednesday. Go. You don't care?
Well, listen, I care about PC. I care about where are we stating right now, because we do want to know, is inflation already too hot? That'll be really key for the Federal Reserve. But broadly, the focus now turns towards what is the path for the next 1 to 2 years. I did not anticipate a few months ago that we would be talking on our teams about 2025 rate hikes. That is not our base case, but we are now having to discuss. We've got, a vision for what rate cuts could look like and a vision for rate hikes at the same time. Two-sided risk to a lot of economic forecasts right now. So any clarity I get is welcome clarity, and I think clarity for markets as well.
Help me here with the Canadian elections. I don't want to get you in trouble with the General Counsel of RBC, but is there a Trump equivalent on the Conservative to go after the Trudeau politics of Canada?
Well, there is an anticipation that there will be a new election in Canada at some point.
So it hasn't been called yet?
It has not been called
yet.
It's
like those crazy British.
Yeah. Exactly.
But at any point, again, we're looking for more certainty for what will happen next. And just a reminder, Canada is not in the same shape as the United States. Productivity is really severe. They've cut immigration. We're actually going to see population declines in Canada in the next few years. That is a very weak economy on the precipice of recession, and a Bank of Canada that's probably heading down to 2%. Right. So those factors are going to be the dominant stories in Canada, election or no election in 2025.
But the Winnipeg Jets keep winning.
Well, there's some good things going on. You're right.
That's right. Tell me about like Vancouver in British Columbia. I mean, you fly out there, every second week or so?
Well, here's something. Taylor Swift is ending her concert tour, the Eras Tour, in Vancouver, also known as the Emerald City. So they'll get a little bit of a boost.
Are you going?
Me too. I got to experience it in Toronto, but we're proudly Canadian getting the last Taylor Swift Eras Tour.
And now, folks, with Francis Donald and Lisa Mateo, we brief you on Wednesdays, Moana 2. Are you you're taking the offspring to Moana?
No question. Right? Why not have children except to bring them to the movies you really want to see but can't go alone to?
Right. Yep.
Okay. You think so, Lisa?
No, she makes up a great point, because you don't want to go by yourself and just say, like, hey, I'm watching an animated movie. Your kids are the excuse.
Really? I didn't know that. Do you know how far back I go? Like Cinderella?
Oh, yeah.
It's like ancient history. They did it by hand. Now it's all razzle.
Now it's on CGI, yeah.
Yeah, Kung Fu Panda.
You're not taking a soldier guy, are you? He's not going to go see Moana.
No, he's not.
No, not at all.
Can't get him out of bed. Francis Donald, thank you so much with RBC Capital Markets this morning. There is a lift to the market. The Dow up 1.1%, 477 points. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
All right, some point, Lisa, we're seeing a market cheer for President-elect Trump's pick to lead the Treasury Department. Key Square Group founder Scott Bessent, Bloomberg's Lori Davison, has more from Washington.
Scott Bessent is very much a known entity on Wall Street. He invested for Soros for many years, and in recent years, he's run his own macro hedge fund. So he's seen as someone who understands markets, who's competent.
Bloomberg's Laura Davison. Matt Gaetz may be out as Attorney General, but some of President-elect Donald Trump's other cabinet picks could be in for a tough road on Capitol Hill. Senators have questions about Tulsi Gabbard's meeting with Syrian President Assad when she served in Congress. And Pete Hegseth is under scrutiny over a 2017 sexual assault investigation and his view that women should not serve in combat. Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Michael Herzog, says a ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon could come within days. That's what he's telling Israel's Army radio after the latest round of U.S. shuttle diplomacy. And Bloomberg's Middle East anchor, Jemana Bersachi, is monitoring from Dubai.
Amos Hochstein, the Middle East envoy, was just in the region last week having conversations with the Lebanese side and the Israeli side. He spoke to the Lebanese Speaker of the House, Nabi Berri, who suggested that a ceasefire agreement has been accepted by Hezbollah, but with a few, quote, technical details. Now, it remains to be seen what exactly those technical details are, but definitely Amos Hochstein felt like he had enough in offering to go to the Israeli side. And we're hearing this morning from that ambassador that they potentially could come to a truce agreement in the next couple of days.
Bloomberg's Jemana Bersachi in Dubai. Nearly 200 countries agreed to triple the amount of money available to help developing countries confront rapidly warming temperatures. But the deal reached at the close of the two-week COP29 summit in Azerbaijan resulted from fractious and at times openly hostile negotiations, producing an agreement that even its supporters may see as insufficient and disappointing. And Roman Catholic faithful will be able to view St. Peter's tomb remotely. This is all part of the Vatican's technological outreach with its far-flung flock during the upcoming Holy Year. Pope Francis will inaugurate a webcam December 2nd to be installed beneath the main altar of St. Peter's Basilica. Another webcam is going to be placed on the Basilica's holy door for the 2025 Jubilee, during which indulgences for the forgiveness of sins are granted to pilgrims who travel to Rome and enter through the door. Paul Tom tried to go through that door when he was in Rome. It fell off its hinges.
I went through St. Christopher. It was great. I went the other way around. But it's something to behold. Rome was like, let's go. When are we going back? Rome was that successful. Lots of tourists, though.
Yeah.
It's like you try to avoid the tourist move. John Tucker, thank you so much. Sweeney whispering in my ears in August, one of the 3 days he worked in the month of August.
Yep.
Tom, buy Disney.
Oh boy.
Up 35% off the summer bottom as well. That's a lot of Moana.
That's a lot of
Moana. Why are they up? Is it just Iger's got his act together?
Streaming turned really profitable, and they put out some guidance that shows it's going to be much more profitable going forward. That's what the street's been waiting probably 4 years for, and now we're starting to finally see it, and that's kind of simple.
It's just that simple.
Simple as that.
So the sell side tone is they can break out above the March peak and find some new nirvana.
Yep, absolutely right. And then 25 is going to be a monster year for Hollywood. All the films that they didn't
for
release
the movies,
this year, last year,
because of strike, COVID, all that.
Yep, perfect.
We will see. Dow up 444 points. Stay with us. In the 10 o'clock hour, they cover Bitcoin. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got stocks climbing, yields, the dollar falling. Traders kind of welcoming Donald Trump's pick of Scott Bessent for U.S. Treasury Secretary. Let's start with stocks. We'll start with the S&P 500 up 0.8%. The S&P 500 extending their gains for a sixth straight day, up 49 points right now at 6,018. We have the Dow up more than 1%, 474 points. The NASDAQ up more than 1%, 193 points. We have the two-year yield at 4.30%. That's down 7 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's down 10 basis points. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.5%. We have the Japanese yen, euro, British pound stronger. Bitcoin right now above 96,000. Shares of Macy's lower this morning, down 3%. It said it would delay the release of its third quarter earnings, and this is after an investigation showed that an employee hid tens of millions of dollars of expenses. Then you have shares of Bath & Body Works. They're up 21%, boosted its earnings per share forecast for the full year. We have more retail tap on schedule this week, including results from Best Buy, Abercrombie & Fitch, Kohl's, Nordstrom's, Dick's Sporting Goods. After the bell today, it's on to Zoom Video Communications. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Again, a lift to the market here. SPX up 0.8%. The VIX 14.61 drives lower from that 17 level. This is a segment here where we can do it on like 3, 4, 5 things. We got to try to get through this in one piece. Joining us, John Devaney, who owns half of Florida. He's with United Capital Markets, and of course, and this is in fancy bonds, CLO bonds. Yep. Okay, they're named after J-Lo or something like that. CMBS, RMBS, and the rest. He's also in the movie business. We'll get to that. But he's also in the Florida business, a cheerleader for Florida. Is the Florida, wonderful to have you here. Is the Florida boom going to end?
Well, Tom, first of all, I would just like to say that you've had an amazing career, and Bloomberg has helped me, and you have helped me in my career tremendously.
I'm going to tear up here. It's too much. Okay, so we need to be at spring training at Sarasota, Baltimore Orioles, Boston Red Sox, just to have you on again in March.
Yeah, but it's true. Just one moment, because I'm an outsider, and I own a broker-dealer that now has traded $75 billion of products, and I founded it at 29 years old, and I couldn't have done it without Bloomberg, the network, the client network, all the analytics. I had the little Bloomberg keyboard.
Remember
this big.
that?
I was there right from the beginning.
Yeah, what's the green button for? We had no idea.
Yeah, so my business wouldn't even be here to this day. We wouldn't have traded all of these flows and been a leading market maker in the structured finance bonds without Bloomberg as my partner.
We'll get to Florida in a moment. You don't want to talk about it. In structured finance, is there the exuberance we see in the equity market this morning?
Yeah, Tom. Right now, I'm just focused on trading commercial mortgage bonds, and there's some very big flashing warning signs that I think a lot of Americans really don't know, and a lot of investors don't know. So the regional bank system still remains in deep trouble. There are office mortgage defaults that I believe will be considerably higher than what anybody might imagine. There are 15 cities in our country right now: San Francisco, Chicago, Philadelphia, Oakland, Los Angeles, Denver, Washington, D.C. There are 20-30% of every single building is underwater right now, maybe more. We've got a real big data tool. There's quite a few defaults that have already happened, and we expect quite a bit more to come.
So we saw that we did a story last week on the B of A building in Los Angeles, which just traded hands at almost a 2/3 discount to value. Where does a pain come? It comes for the equity owners in that commercial real estate. Where will we see it in the bank?
No, it's eviscerating these bonds that I own. I own 50 or 60 bonds in my book, and I'm frankly a little bit ticked off. Okay, we've got some of these triple Bs that could be wiped out, and the double Bs, these conduit deals are $1 billion. They have about 50 loans in them. About 25% are offices, but just that 25% of office exposure is enough. Okay, because these things are, like you said, are going down by 2/3 lower than the mortgage balance, which is unheard of. Okay, these are worse losses than even in the financial crisis, and I'll tell you why it is in these cities. So the smartest thing I could say for you, since I'm on here as an expert, is this: we all know that when the 10-year went up, it makes everything go down. Bonds go down, commercial real estate go down. When a cap rate goes up, the stuff goes down. The best buildings, because these cap rates went from 4.5% to 6.5%, the best buildings are down by a third. These are the most Class A ones. So that's already a major problem, having rates go up. Then second is work at home. I'm not going to get into that. Everybody knows that. Okay. Then inflation makes the profits go down. We all know that because they can't raise rate.
I got to ask you, because the uproar just over the weekend, Lisa, you mentioned the Goldman Sachs utility thing where they took a $900 million write-down. You came out of Fort Collins, Colorado State,
yes, sir,
and you invented yourself. John Devaney on private equity and private credit. Where's it going to be in 36 months?
Private equity and private credit. I don't specialize in that area.
I know you don't, but come on, you live it. Come on, you live in it.
Okay.
Okay. So are they gonna? What you mentioned earlier, Paul? Make their mark? Are they gonna make their marks and get out a hole?
I think that there's a big shift towards, from what I read in the news, as I said, I'm really not an expert in private credit, but I know that a lot of these very, very large hedge funds and other institutions are competing against a lot of the commercial banks and very large regional banks to supply credit. I think that there might be a little bit of a bubble there, but again, I'm not an expert.
All right, so what do you do here? Carl Icahn short triple Bs. What is that a trade you think is a good trade?
Yeah, what Carl did, Carl shorted the Series 6 CMBX derivative index that was very heavy in malls, and he was wrong. Really, he believed that many of the malls would default at maturity, and the simple thing that he missed was the ability of these special servicers to modify the loan, because they've got a lot of leeway to extend those mortgages, which was really what happened in most of the cases. So he didn't win on that one. And
John, I hit the blue button. The Detroit Lion. Michael Barr's not here to hit the Detroit Lion blue button. I gotta end with this. Coral Gables. It's $1,100 per square foot. In 7 years, on the asking price, it's done a double. Explain your Florida. Is the boom just going to continue, or is there a constraint?
Yeah, there's a really big population migration happening right now. That is impacting many of the cities that I mentioned earlier. We've got Ken Griffin at Citadel moved his headquarters to Florida.
Yeah.
So that there's very, very strong migration, and some of it's related to our different taxes in the state of Florida. And so Florida is booming, Texas is booming. The outlook for residential and commercial real estate in those two states is stronger than any of the states in the union. But if I might just quickly go back to
we're almost out of time.
The commercial real estate.
Sure.
In my view, it's flawed social policy in those 15 cities. It's the open-air drug markets in San Francisco. It's they've just reversed this, but they had the
election,
shoplifting. They had smash and grab shoplifting. They defunded the police. So the crime is so bad that most of those cities are also sanctuary cities, and so the crime
valuation, and that's impacting the valuation of the.
I think it's the highest weight of anything. I think that the employers and the residents, the employers said enough is enough, and we won't renew these leases and subject our employees to this,
John,
and that's what led to the occupancy collapse.
Got to leave it there with United Capital Markets. John Devaney, thank you so much for joining us today. Greatly appreciate that. Got to lift to the market here. It's a Sweeney bull market. SPX up 0.5%, 0.5% here, and the VIX is the real story. Coming in 14.82. Yields are in. The 10-year yield in a large 10 basis points as well. For Lisa, we had to play the rock and buy a claim. Francis Dono said, "Give me the theme song. Moana 2 Wednesday. We remember Moana.